Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of the Notre Dame Mailbag at Irish Breakdown. I am your publisher, Brian Driscoll, joined today by my man, Sean Davis of ESPN Chicago and the Lucky Lefty podcast. And we are here today, Sean, to talk all things Notre Dame and Notre Dame recruiting. But, normally it's me and it's you and Vince, and we're determining what we're going to talk about. Well, today, it's all up to our listeners, and we've got a lot going on already, and I am ready to jump in. Tommy Guns is fired up and ready to roll. See, I like Tommy because Tommy's, he's got that Irish heritage too, Sean, and I can fool with people like that. Those are my people right there. Those are my people. Tommy Guns is ready for the Friday mailbag. And he's going to start us off with a question. So he says, Brian, are there any tea leaves hearing anything about possible commitments following the weekend should everything go as planned? Obviously disregarding those with dates already set up. So obviously this is going to be a huge recruiting weekend. I'm going to have an article coming out this afternoon. I'm about halfway done with it now, talking about how, Sean, to me, this is a gap closing. This is a program defining weekend for Notre Dame. That's right. That's why Sean is rocking the gear today. Because not only is it a big game for Notre Dame on Saturday night and all those things, but it is a big weekend because there are kids on campus this weekend, including some commits that they need to keep in the class. But there are kids on campus this weekend that if they can add them to what is already an excellent 2022 class, it changes the program. I mean, they're not gap. I mean, each of them individually are gap closers. So we're talking about Xavier Nwankpa. We're talking about Anthony Lucas. We're talking about Hero Kanu. We're talking about Billy Shrouth. And some of the 2023 kids, but I'm more focused on the 2022 kids this weekend.
Right.
If individually, they're all gap closers, in my opinion, especially the first three. But collectively, the more of them you get in the class, it's a gap erasing class. I mean, when you look at already having the running back, Jadarian Price, who's having a great senior year, you've got Tobias Merriweather and C.J. Williams at receiver. Eli Raridan, who was a great find by this staff, just jumped up into the 247 top 100. He was a 3-star kid, not in the top 500. People finally realizing what we knew, what Notre Dame knew all along, which is this kid's really good. Holden Stace, you've got a couple top 200 offensive linemen in the class. You've got Tyson Ford, who's an absolute monster. Aiden Gabera, who's really come on and is a top player. You've got the best linebacker class in the country, and it's not close.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, you have what I believe is a very, very strong, arguably the best cornerback class in the country, in Devin Moore, Benjamin Morrison, and Jaden Mickey. And then you have Jaden Bellamy, who's kind of a swing guy. You add Xavier Nwankpa, Billy Shrouth, and Anthony Lucas to that class. And you could throw Hero Kanu in as well, if you don't get Lucas and you get Hero, or if you can get both of them. I mean, you're talking about a group that contend, in my opinion, for the best class in the country. And I won't have points-wise, probably won't, because the flaws in the grading system. But if we're just looking at it and say, who would you trade for that class? I don't know if there would be any. And that's the potential that this recruiting class has. And the guys that they need to get are all going to be in the same building on Saturday night. And that building is called the house that Rockne built. No, it's called Notre Dame Stadium is what it's called. And it's a huge weekend, Sean. Huge weekend.
Well, going back to the guys and the recruits that we talked about over the summer, I've been in love with Xavier Nwankpa since I first laid eyes on this film.
Mm-hmm.
Just the ability to play center field, rangy, tackles, loves to put his head and his nose in the business up at the line of scrimmage. That type of guy, especially, it bodes well because he gets to watch himself when he watches Kyle Hamilton on Saturday night.
Mm-hmm.
Like, literally, he can sit there and say, this is how Marcus Freeman wants to use me.
Mm-hmm.
And I venture to say, when the coaches do talk to him before the game, that's probably what they'll lay out. Keep your eyes on 14 all night. And it's something you said, you pointed out. I remember we had a discussion about the offensive linemen in Wisconsin and how big it would be for us to make an imprint with those big offensive linemen. And then you talked about making an imprint and actually beating Ohio State for some of these players in the next 2 cycles. And this is an opportunity to do both of those things. We've heard the news about Shrouth this week, the rumors and everything, that's great. And hopefully that trend continues. But like you said, with Lucas and Nwamka. You get 2 of those 3 that you talked about, and this class goes from being very good to game changer.
Yes.
Like we said. So this game, we don't like to put pressure on the team, on the field, but everything needs to go right Saturday night. From atmosphere, crowd being the game, letting these recruits see what it's like to be a part of this program, letting them know that it's special from the moment you set foot on the campus in South Bend. And then you need the team to go out and just show the physicality and show the style of play that they're going to be stepping into and what shoes they have to fill in the next 4 years when they show up in Notre Dame. Everything needs to go right. And I do have a really good feeling that things will go right on Saturday night while these recruits are in the house.
Yeah, I feel good about it too. And regarding Tommy's question regarding tea leaves, obviously what we reported on the Irish Breakdown message board, which is very similar to what Tom Loy is reporting at 247 Sports, which is everything we're hearing is, I don't know what happened in the last 2 weeks, but there's been a complete 180 in his recruitment.
Yeah.
And he was a guy that nobody was talking about really, and they didn't have a shot with. I had been told by sources he just didn't want to play for the current situation at that position. And whatever's happened in the last 2 weeks, it's flipped to the point where now it's kind of like it'll be a little bit of surprise if he doesn't commit. Now, I still haven't been told he's definitely able to set it up for this weekend.
Right.
It was either this weekend or next weekend, but they were shooting for this weekend. I haven't heard specifically. I'll reach out and try to figure that out today. But he's obviously the one that right now they say, okay, that's the guy that it's looking good with.
Yeah.
The next guy is Xavier Nwamka. Now, this has been an interesting recruitment. Ohio State was the team that was to beat early. Right. We talked this summer that the fear was Ohio State was his first visit. The fear was that he was going to go there and commit, and he almost did. But he decided to wait, made the visit to South Bend, and that changed things. And that made him more open to the idea of not going to Ohio State. I think that Notre Dame obviously has continued to charge and charge and charge and charge. There's a lot of rumblings and stuff about Iowa being the team to beat now. I don't know if I necessarily buy that. I think Iowa's doing a great job. You look at the product they're putting on the field for the most part on defense has been pretty good. Even the game against Purdue, they lost. It wasn't – I mean, their defense didn't play terrible. They didn't play good, but they didn't play terrible. They couldn't cover David Bell. But, I mean, they held Purdue to 24 points. Most weeks that should be good enough to help you win a game.
Yeah.
And, Notre Dame went through that. Held Cincinnati 24 points and still lost. That's not on the defense. But I have a hard time – if things go well this weekend, I have a hard time seeing him not going to Iowa, right? Yeah. That's going to be the key. Now, Ohio State's still battling for him, despite what the Ohio State beat people or, recruiting analysts are saying. That's what happens when they fade for a kid. It's like, oh, well, I don't want him. It's like Ohio State never loses a kid. It's like, no, they stopped recruiting him, right? That's kind of how it goes. But I feel good about where things stand coming into the visit. But with Nwamka, the visit's going to be the key, right? He's already made an official. Notre Dame made a big move then. They've got to make another big move this weekend. Now, here's the thing that's interesting. Devin Moore and Benjamin Morrison visited the first weekend in June. Jaden Mickey visited the last weekend in June, and so did Jaden Bellamy. Nwamka visited in the middle. He has not had a chance to meet those guys face-to-face. Mickey, Morrison, and Moore are all expected on campus this weekend. Along with Josh Burnham, I believe Jalen Sneed's going to be on campus this weekend. Junior Tuihalamaka is going to be on. I mean, there's a lot of – Nolan Ziegler is going to be on campus this weekend. Joey Tanone is going to be on campus this weekend. C.J. Williams and Tobias Merriweather are going to be on campus this weekend. There's going to be about 3 times as many commits on campus as there are going to be uncommitted kids in the 2022 classes for the most part.
Yeah.
And that is huge for Notre Dame. And that's especially going to be huge, in my opinion, with Xavier Nwamka, because I think that's the final piece, is really connecting with the committed kids. I think that's going to be the final piece that's going to say, yeah, this is where I want to be. That's my read on the situation. So I think he's the one that I feel, other than Shrout, they have the best shot at right now. Anthony Lucas, to me, has been kind of all over the place. There's been times where Notre Dame was like, I think they're the team to beat right now. Miami was that team at times. I think Oregon's made some charges at times. Texas A&M, I think right now is the team making the best charge. They've got some momentum going. This is another one that it has to be a great weekend. Unique thing about Anthony Lucas is he comes from a family that from everything I've been told really understands the importance of you've got to get that education piece. But other programs have done a little better job selling the combination of academics, but with the athletic part. This is a weekend that Mike Elson gets to say, look what we are doing this year with guys that aren't you.
Right.
And then, if Notre Dame can dominate the line of scrimmage on defense with Anthony there looking on, that's going to be big. And it's another reason why, Sean, what you said is what happens on the field is going to be important because is it the end all be all? No, it's not. I mean, I could give you examples of Michael Floyd visiting during the 2007 season or Manti for the Syracuse game in 08. But that's usually not how it goes, with a guy like Anthony Lucas, a guy that I think you're trailing. I mean, let's be honest, you're trailing for right now, but you're in the game. It can be one of those things that not so winning or losing, but more so. I mean, they could win 50-35 and not impress Anthony Lucas or Xavier Nwangwu. It's about watching that position and saying, see what Jason Adamiola and Myron Tagovailoa do. Those are the two roles we see you for, right? And letting them make plays. Same as Xavier Nwangwu. Now, Notre Dame's doing a good job from what I hear of not preaching the whole you're the next Kyle Hamilton thing, which kids don't like to hear.
Right.
But more of a, okay, look at what we ask our safeties to do and look how Kyle thrives. You could do that as well. They've done a good job with that. So, if Kyle can have a big game or if the other safeties can have a big game, it's going to be big for Notre Dame. So, that's as far as T. Lee's. Now, Walker Howard's the one I know everybody's talking about. He's a quarterback from Louisiana. Obviously, LSU's fired their coach.
Yeah.
That's given Notre Dame a window there. I honestly think that's the worst thing if Notre Dame has a shot with Walker Howard, I think him Orgeron being fired could potentially be the worst case scenario for Notre Dame because there was so much uncertainty with him there. Walker Howard's dad played at LSU, played quarterback at LSU. They're going to wait to see who gets hired. And I think the new coach is going to be able to come in and say, hey, look what we're doing and look what we're, this, that, and the other, and it's going to get them on board. I think the best chance Notre Dame had was Ed Orgeron staying and that cloud still hovering over his head going into signing day. So I'd be shocked if Notre Dame gets Walker Howard, to be honest with you. I just don't see it happening. And of course, there's a ton of 2023 kids, but we'll talk about those guys at a later date.
Well, I will say this. I'm hearing that they have their top candidate, and that top candidate happens to be a Big Ten coach who has turned a program around recently that has connections. He's been there on the staff before under Nick Saban. And since it's not concrete, I don't want to throw his name out there, but he's done a really good job at the Big Ten school, and he's turned around this year. I don't know how he matches up from a recruiting standpoint.
We've talked about him, Sean. If you want to go ahead and throw the name out, you don't have to, but we've talked about him.
It's Mel Tucker. Mel Tucker's the guy. There has a relationship, SEC relationships. Was there with Nick Saban. Was also at Georgia recently. He was also at Georgia, so very familiar with the lay of the land down there. That's the guy they're going to make a run at. That's what we've been hearing. And when you think about that, it goes back to your point. They're going to wait. I don't know how much. I've watched film on him. I've seen you discuss him. Wouldn't be a bad get, but I think the two guys, I would be more excited about the two quarterbacks in the 23 class.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
Rather than adding him to the 22 class. This is from a positional standpoint, I think, because you kind of laid it out who you think Shrouf is pretty much the guy. Like that, let's get him first. But impact on Notre Dame as a program, do you see Shrouf still as the guy that you need to get in the class more than Nwangwu?
No, not more than Nwangwu, no. But,
okay.
But offensively, he's, to me, your biggest remaining uncommitted player.
Okay.
There's a reason we haven't talked about Zach Rice in 2 months. He wasn't coming. Right. And the other thing, too, is if I was anti-Jeff Quinn, like some people say, I would have come on here and hammered him for not getting Zach Rice. I think Zach Rice is overrated. I've said it 1,000 times. They've missed 3 tackles that are better than Zach Rice.
Yeah.
And I never bought into the hype about how he's going to come to Notre Dame and all that. I said, look, Notre Dame made a move. I don't see it happening. I'm not going to hammer Jeff Quinn for that. I don't think Harry Heastan would have got Zach Rice. Right. I don't think Zach Rice wanted to come to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I mean, look, he turned down Notre Dame and Alabama to go to North Carolina. So
that says a lot.
Right. So Shrouth to me was always a guy that I thought was better than Zach Rice. Now, I'm concerned about the lack of tackles in this class, but Billy Shrouth is excellent. He's a top 100 player in my opinion.
Yeah.
That would be a huge get. Now, again, the primary recruiter for him has been Tommy Rees. So, and Brian Kelly's been number 2. So it would be to me, it would be a thing that was kind of meant as a shot as the offensive line coach, but it was also meant as a Tommy Rees is showing he can go out and be a big factor in landing kids that aren't just quarterbacks. I mean, look at what he had, the role he had CJ Williams. Look at the role he had in getting Billy Shrouth. I mean, he's played a role in some of these big commitments.
And he's played
that's
a role
really important.
in Walker Howard having interest in Notre Dame.
Well, that's I mean, that's the only reason he's on campus is the relationship with Tommy Rees.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily Notre Dame, and it's the relationship with Tommy Rees. Now, hopefully you can sell Notre Dame on what makes it unique. So that to me, and we can talk about the Mel Tucker thing a little bit later, Sean, because I'd be curious to get your opinion on that. I have a strong opinion on that, and I think that they need to be careful leaking that too strongly because Michigan State still has to play Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan down the stretch, and that schedule's a little bit. They still have 5 games left, right? And those 5 games are coming against Michigan at home, at Purdue, at Ohio State, and home against Penn State. Do you really want to hire an 8-4 guy from Michigan State? I don't know if that's what you want to do.
Saban was what? Saban was 9-3 when he left Michigan State for LSU.
Yeah. But the perception of Michigan State back then was a little bit different. Nick Saban stepped into a Michigan State team that had been bad for a while.
True.
And turned them around. Michigan State was in the college football playoff 6 years ago.
I will say their win total before the season was set at 4.5.
Yeah. Oh, he's done a great job there. But you and I both know that perception is a big part of this, and that's where I'm coming from. If you think Mel Tucker's a great coach right now, what happens in the next 5 games shouldn't change that. It's like my opinion of Jeff Brom. I think Jeff Brom's a great coach. However, we're talking about boosters. We're talking about fans that can create such a toxic culture around a hire that a guy never gets an opportunity.
Right.
And that's my point. You go out and go a guy that loses 4 of his last 5 games at Michigan State in the Big Ten, a conference that SEC people do not respect, right?
Yeah.
They're going to be like, this is the guy we're hiring? Seriously? Right. And Nick Saban went 9-2. I just looked up. They went 9-2. They went 9-3 that season, but he didn't coach the bowl game.
Okay.
So they went 9-2. That was that Plexico Burris team. Actually, no, they went 10-2 that year. I just looked it up because that's right. Because I remember. Remember, Bobby Williams led him to a bowl victory over Florida, and then got promoted, which turned out to be
a bad hire for me.
That's why you don't hire assistant coaches just because they finish well. Ed Orgeron. So to me, if you're looking from an LSU standpoint, they better be huge Michigan State fans this next month. Because if they go like 10-2 against that schedule, that's a heck of a year. When you look at what he inherited, when you look at where Michigan State was, again, because the perception of Michigan State's been a pretty good team for a while.
Yeah.
The last year under D'Antonio, there was a cloud, and Mel came in, and Coach Tucker came in, and they didn't have a good first year. But Vince and I have said this a million times, Sean. I don't hold the 2020 season against anyone that was taking over the first year as a coach, especially a Big Ten team.
Yeah.
Because of the craziness of that. But, they went 7-6 in their last year under Coach D'Antonio, last 2 years under Coach D'Antonio, and then 3 years before he took over, they were 10-3. So it's not like he walked into, the situation that Brian Kelly walked into, or
from a scandal standpoint, there were some things there that he walked into that he had to deal with, and there was some roster flip.
A lot of roster flip.
Yeah, to where he had some transfers. You get a guy like Kenny Walker, to come in. That's a Heisman candidate, and you have to tip your cap. The one thing I will say is they get 2 of those 3 big games at home in East Lansing. The Ohio State game that's going to be a tough game on the road. I just really think that's going to be a tough game on the road.
And you don't even need to win it though, Sean. In my
No,
opinion,
you don't.
It's just gotta be a 4-quarter game.
Yeah.
And he's got to go. I think he's got, for a perception standpoint, he's got to go 3-2.
I agree.
In my opinion, he's got to go 3-2. Part of it because of what you just said. 2 of the 3 big games are at home.
Yeah.
They get Penn State at home. They get Michigan at home.
Yep.
So I think the Michigan game, though, might be the biggest for him, perception-wise. I think because I think it's that rivalry game.
For the boosters, absolutely. And alumni, that's the most important game. The Ohio State game on the road, if you come away from that with, let's say you play them tough and you lose by 10 points, and it was a 4-quarter game. Everybody's happy with that.
Because you look at the roster difference and talent between Ohio State and Michigan State, that should be a 30-point game.
Absolutely.
So he's got, but that's the thing is the perception has to be there, and that's why I even think he could get away with 9-3, as long as they beat Michigan and get upset by Purdue, right? Like something like that, right? Like at Purdue just beat Iowa. I think people could live with that, but he's going to have to finish strong, because if he loses those 3 big games plus they drop a game to Purdue, go 8-4.
Yeah.
And let's say Dave Aranda keeps winning at Baylor. There's going to be a lot of people like, wait a minute, why aren't we going after that dude?
Right.
I mean, he just was our D coordinator on the championship team. Why aren't we going after that guy?
Right.
So, or maybe even Billy Napier at Louisiana. So he's got to finish strong. He's got to finish strong, because it's understandable why they're attracted to him. At Georgia, the year they played for the championship, was it Bama the year they won a championship? Coach in the NFL, he's got the NFL pedigree, which is always a big selling point at LSU. Hey, you can produce NFL players. Hey, man, I was a D coordinator in the NFL. Right. So I think all those things are going to be big for him, but it's going to be very interesting. And then who does he hire? That's going to be the other thing.
I'm not sure, and I'm being honest here, Brian. I'm not sure I take the job if I'm him.
Okay. I had a similar conversation with a friend of mine the other day. Explain that.
Understand.
I came down with the same point of view you did. So please explain this one.
I understand it's LSU. And everyone's like, it's a top 5 program. It's an SEC program. The recruiting base is fantastic in the state of Louisiana and connecting states. You have to be honest with who you are and what fits you the best at that time. And right now, the job he's doing in the foundation he's laying in Michigan State, I see success, continued success for him in the next 2 to 3 years. I really do. And I would rather take that than to have to go and immediately battle Nick Saban, Dan Mullen, Jimbo Fisher, who's also rumored for the job, who pretty much stood up and said, I'm not going anywhere. But he said that at Florida State as well.
Right. Lane Kiffin, Kirby Smart, Mark Stoops, Mike Leach. And crazy. Josh Heupel's doing a heck of a job, in my opinion, at Tennessee.
At Tennessee, so absolutely. Far. And you might as well throw in Lincoln Riley and Sark.
Right. I mean, and you could even say Clark Lee. I mean, he's a guy that people have a lot of respect for as a coach, and he inherited a mess. I mean, so the head coaching roster in the SEC right now is strong. And the other part of it too, Sean, is there's a lot of stuff going on at LSU that's not being reported in the news.
Absolutely.
Because they're, for whatever reason, not interested in it. That's concerning if I'm walking into that situation. And Mel did that. Coach Tucker did that at Michigan State. But do you want to walk into that again at LSU?
No.
With all and I don't think LSU's the job people make it out to be. I really don't. I think it's a really good job. It's not like this life-altering. There's a reason.
Perception, right?
Right. There's a reason they ended up with Ed Orgeron.
Yeah.
I mean, Tom Herman decided Texas was a better gig. It's been like that for a while.
Yeah.
There's some jobs that I think the media thinks are better jobs than coaches think that it is. And LSU is one of those. I think USC is one of those as well. And there's a reason USC keeps ending up with, the interim coach being named the head coach, because a lot of people are like, yeah, I'm good. I don't want to deal with that crap.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
everybody can't beat Pete Carroll.
No. And they didn't want him. Like he was like their 5th option. So it's anyway. So let's get to some more, Sean. We got Old Grim says, I still have many doubts about this team. I'll be honest, Old Grim, I think based on what we've seen, I get it. We have to see. So we've talked a lot about what we think could happen in the second half if they make adjustments A, B, C, D, E, and F. We won't know till tomorrow night if they actually did that. I mean, we need to see it. We need to see it. So I understand the cautious outlook that some have, and you'll see it in the game predictions on the message board at Irish Breakdown. You'll see it in the predictions people had yesterday, that there's a lot of people that are wait and see mode, and I can't knock you for that. I completely get it.
It's easy to love the 2012 team. It's easy to love the 2017 squad, the 2020 squad, teams that were successful, right?
Yeah.
The 1995 squad is one of my favorite teams. And this team could end up being one of my favorite teams. And what I mean by that is, teams that might not be as successful as other teams, but you see the progress and you see this team plays hard.
Mm-hmm.
You might not you pointed out you wanted to see more effort from the offensive line.
And we're starting to get that the last couple games.
We're starting to get there. It hasn't been for not trying. Like, I think the guys.
It hasn't been a player problem, Sean.
No,
this
not
is
at
a
all.
coach problem.
So this team is a very lovable team.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I might be in the minority, but for me, this team is a very lovable team. I think they have great players to watch. You have young players that show you what the future can be. You have strong leadership, and they play hard and they play together. Now, is the outcome always the best thing or the most beautiful thing you can see on a football field? No. But I was very proud at that Virginia Tech win. Extremely proud, because that's a tough environment. Things weren't going their way.
Now 8 points with 3.5 minutes left.
Yes. And for them to respond and the reaction when Austin came down with that 2-point conversion, the reaction on the sideline shows you like they wanted that game. And
They're still playing for each other.
Yes. And I've said this all week. I thought the team was tired. I thought they looked a half step slow, especially defensively. But they gave so much effort. They're resilient. They don't give up. And that is very exemplary of what you want as a fan from a team. Like, regardless of the record, if I can watch that every week, I can deal with the outcome.
But I think I'm gonna take a devil's advocate point of view, Sean. I think the resiliency plus the talent that people see every week, and they look at the sorry schedule that Notre Dame plays this year, and that's the frustrating point that people have.
You're right.
Sorry. That talent plus that attitude and resiliency, that team was that lovable team you're talking about, which I agree. And Vince and I talked about that after the show on Saturday night, about that game. Is like, this team had every reason in the world to just say, screw it.
Yep.
And they didn't. And I love the what we're seeing from the players, but that's why I say they're being failed by their leaders in some instances. Not all, but in some, mainly offense, special teams, head coach.
Yeah.
And that's the frustration. Is like, so, like, when that 1995 team you talk about, they got blasted on the road against Ohio State. That was a way better Ohio State team than what Notre Dame was.
Absolutely.
Went and played Florida State in the Orange Bowl. Florida State had better players than they did that year. They battled their butts off. I mean, Derek Mays went off, and the Northwestern loss was bad, but that team went on the road and just crushed Texas, beat number 5 USC by 28. That was a fun team to watch because you felt like you were getting everything out of that team that they had.
Absolutely.
And that's the difference for me, is from a player standpoint, agree with you wholeheartedly. But I also think that's why I'm so frustrated right now, is because they're not being maximized. We have a little bit of a different view here from Ben Elijah. And I purposely didn't bring your super chat up, Ben, because I wanted to counter it with Old Grimm's skepticism. But Ben Elijah is confident about this weekend. And Ben, thank you for the super chat very, very much. He says, going to go ahead and put this out there now. This will be Notre Dame's best running game of the season by far. I can feel it in my bones. 36-24 Notre Dame. Go Irish. So Ben is on the optimistic side, I think, which is where you are, Sean. I think you're very optimistic about what this team is going to be in the second half. So that's going to be a if they run the ball against USC, I'll be encouraged if it's done the right way. Vince and I talked about this yesterday. Vince is like, you have to establish the run. And I'm like, yeah, I don't really care about that because I don't think USC's defense is any good. And I think you can run on USC. But that doesn't mean you're going to be able to go run on, some of the other teams that you're going to play. And forcing the run with this team, to me, continues to go away from what your strengths are and what you need to be. Because you could run the table. You could play good football the rest of the way, run the table, get into a New Year's Six Bowl. You think you're still a team that can do 12 and 13 personnel. Then you go play, let's say Alabama loses to Georgia in the SEC title game and you get matched up against Bama in the Sugar Bowl and you think you're going to go 12 and 13 personnel against them. It's going to be another big game L.
Yeah.
Right. You got to accept who you are. And even if they do run the ball effectively on Saturday, I mean, Oregon State ran for over 300 yards against them. And the fact that Oregon State's a way better running team than Notre Dame right now is kind of sad, makes me want to cry.
Yeah.
But that's who Oregon State is. That's not who Notre Dame should be, in my opinion. So that's where I stand on that one.
Yeah, I think the running game will be effective on Saturday night. And we pointed out various reasons throughout the week. We talked about in the matchups why that is. Defensive line, we know pretty much that Dante Williams is going to have is very small, and they're not as athletic as most traditional USC defenses, especially at the linebacker position. So with that being said, they're going to slant, twist, and try to interrupt whatever Notre Dame is doing along the offensive line, which is confusion. Now, on the left side, now you have a young left side of the offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm a defensive coordinator, I'm trying to confuse that side of the offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I'm attacking.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to anticipate that as an offensive coordinator. And like you said, don't just come out early and say, okay, they can't stop the run. We're just about to pound the ball. They'll have a plan for that because they're expecting you to do that. So now, be creative, especially early on. We call it the clean sheet, before you start writing on it in the middle of the game, making adjustments and all of that. Tommy Rees and his clean sheet, he has to be more creative. But we've been asking him to do that all season long. I need to see a jet sweep. Braden Lindsey already took a reverse the distance against USC before.
And a better USC defense than this one.
Absolutely. So go back to it. Move Kevin Austin around. Get Michael Mayer back. He's supposedly 100%. He's Superman if he's 100% coming off a groin. He's absolutely Superman. But regardless of that, use your your running backs early in the pass game. That's what I would do. Quick screen passes, arrow routes out of the backfield, play action, some other things, get the ball out of Jack Cohn's hand very quickly. And then when you get USC off balance, because they were expecting you to come directly at them, now start to pound them going into the second quarter and third quarter. And like you said, by the middle of the third quarter, like they've done the last 3 games, USC they'll let go of the rope. They'll give up.
Yeah.
They've shown at the last 3 games. They will give up if you go ahead and pound them.
USC is a team that just doesn't seem to play in close games this year, one way or the other.
No,
I mean, they don't play. I mean, think about it. They beat San Jose State by 23.
Yep.
Beat Washington State by 31. Beat Colorado by 23. Lost to Stanford by 14 in a game that wasn't that close.
No.
Lost to Oregon State by 18 and then lost to Utah by 16 in a game that, again, wasn't that close.
Never in doubt. Yep.
They've yet to play a game that's been decided by single digits. I don't think that's going to change this weekend.
I don't either.
I really don't. Alan, Paul Hamilton, Brian, is there going to be a tailgate for the game this weekend? If so, what are the details? Yes, there are. Yes, there is going to be a tailgate, and I have some details. So I yesterday scheduled food pickups for 11 and 11:30. Nice. My second one will be at Penn Station at 11:30, so I'm going to make my way out to the stadium at that point in time. So I should be getting set up in the Joyce parking lot sometime around noon to 12:15. As soon as I get there and figure out what the there's light posts that kind of signify where in the parking lot you are. I will tweet it out, and I will put it on the Irish Breakdown message board. So if you follow me on Twitter, obviously I'll put it out there. Otherwise, if you're on the message board, I'll have it there also. So we will get started around 12:15. I'm going to probably stay till about 6:37, Sean.
Okay.
Not 6:37, but 6:37.
7.
Like, it's a weird time to leave. Like, it's 6:37. I'm out of here.
It's random.
6:30 to 7. Working on getting a couple things set up to make it a little bit more of a fun, enjoyable day, so I don't have to miss all the football games. We'll see how that goes. But very, very excited about that, obviously. But we will have a tailgate tomorrow. We'll be in the Joyce parking lot, so definitely be there. I've actually had a pretty good response so far of people saying they're going to be there. We'll see if we'll see who shows up. We'll see. Make me a believer, everybody. So I'm a little jaded from the last time. So yes, thank you for asking, and yes, there will be. And then this kind of, Sean, goes back to what we were just talking about from Bill Kostrub. I would just like to finally have a game where we kick someone's butt from start to finish, so I can relax with an adult beverage instead of pacing the floor. To which Tommy Gunn said, "Big facts." So, yeah.
I think you'll see that this is because you've talked about it. I know you guys have talked about it. The offenses that we're going to be facing coming up in the second half. Vince and I talked about it. I want to get your viewpoint on this because I think what we faced defensively was a variety of different attacks the first half of the season. Week to week, when you go through from Wisconsin through Virginia Tech, week to week, you might be changing up a lot of fronts, a lot of different things. I think you're pretty much, especially with USC, North Carolina, and Virginia, offenses that like to spread it out, throw the ball, have decent quarterbacks. Armstrong is like one of the most efficient quarterbacks that you'll face, when you go to Charlottesville.
Where the heck did he come from?
I don't know.
Dude is on pace for over 5,000 passing yards this year.
Yeah. And out of the three, that might be the scariest game because it's a road game. And we have a more talented team, without question.
Bronco's a good coach.
Yeah, Bronco's a very good coach. But I feel like now the defense can lock in. It's like, okay, we're looking at
raid.
Yes. Now we can lock in. This is what we're doing. We're rejuvenated, got our legs back under us. Let's go ahead and run this gauntlet. So if the offense can steadily make improvements, and we did see some against Virginia Tech, but there was still a lot that they left on the field. A lot of plays, a lot of points. If they pick up those points and some of those big plays, and this defense does what I think they can do, you might not stop the yardage of these offenses from gaining yards. But if you keep them out of the end zone, keep them around the 17 to 24 range, I see double-digit wins in at least two of these three games when it comes to North Carolina, USC, and Virginia.
One team that's quite different from all those teams is Navy.
Absolutely.
Notre Dame plays between North Carolina and Virginia. And I've had a lot of people say they're really worried about that game because, it's Marcus Freeman's first time seeing the triple option. That's false. They played Army last year, and they held Army to 276 yards of total offense. 4.3 yards per play, won 24-10. Army only rushed for 182 yards. And I say only 182 yards because, as we've explained in the past, 180 yards for a triple option team is very low. Army on the year averaged 273.
Yeah.
So he's seen it. Plus, of course, Mike Elson's seen it a ton. So this is going to be like, well, gee, I'm not sure what to do against the option, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to have a plan. He's seen it before, and Army was a better team than Navy will be. Navy is not good.
Yeah, Army's definitely a better team. They gave Wisconsin a game last week on the road. So,
they did. And I'm curious to see what they do this weekend too. Army's got some very interesting games coming up because they play at they host Wake Forest. This weekend, which will be very interesting. Okay, so let's get to some more here, Sean. Old Grim says, if they give up 24, I really don't feel good. Just so you know, if USC only scores 24 points this weekend, it would be their season low in points.
Yeah.
And when you're in the 7th game of the year and you've held a team to a season low of points and it would tie the lowest they've had in the last 2 seasons, the last time they scored less than 24 points was all the way back in September of 2019 against Washington. I mean, that's pretty good. In the last 3 seasons, 19, 20, and 21, they've scored fewer than 24 points once.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. If you hold them to 24 points or less, you're pretty good. Clark Lee gave up 27 points to this team 2 years ago, right? So, yeah 24 points is a good mark. Context is important.
Yeah,
it's like Cincinnati. It was like, they give 24 points since then. Well, since that was like almost half of what Cincinnati is averaging on the season.
Absolutely.
That was 19 points below Cincinnati's season scoring average. They say, well, they missed 2 field goals and got 30. Okay, yeah, and then the offense spotted them 10 points with 2 drives that covered less than 10 yards. So if you want to trade that off, they really only scored 20, even if you give them the field goals.
Yep. I agree.
So the defense is not the reason is not the problem for me. Now, will it be against USC? I don't know, but it's been good so far. It had 2 bad quarters, in my opinion, this season, really. So, all righty. D-Rock, my man, a good Friday to all of you. Indy in another close one tomorrow. Stocked up on BP for the second half of the season. Andy Roque here has a couple more Q-Kibs 97. So, Sean, this is a fellow that I'm very interested in talking to. He's going to be at the tailgate tomorrow. Okay. Younger fan. And we were having a private conversation about fans. And he is young, but he is old. He has a very old view of the team, which I like, in that he's not one of those young fans. It's like, well, they need to change the admission standards. They need to, he's like, this is what makes Notre Dame unique. So it'll be very fun to talk about that, because he has an issue with me saying most of the people that I know that want Notre Dame to change all these things to win are younger fans. Not all, but most of the people that have that view. He does not have that view. So it'll be fun to have a conversation with him. Very much looking forward to that. Andy Roque with a question. Andy says, hey guys, how would you feel if Kelly left? Now the premise being Kelly leaves, so he retires, let's say after the season, and Notre Dame hired Luke Fickell. If Kelly did leave after this year, who are your top 3 to 5 candidates in order of preference you would want to replace him with?
I know we agree on one. I already know that from our conversations. We agree on one. Coaches in the same state. He will be in our top 3.
Well, let's go first with the Luke Fickell one. How would you feel if Notre Dame replaced Brian Kelly with Luke Fickell? Again, the premise isn't, we're not talking about Brian Kelly getting fired. We're not doing any of that. We're just saying, let's say Coach Kelly decides, you know what, I've done a lot. I'm worn out. I'm ready to move on to something else. My son's playing college football at Grand Valley. He's going to be a junior. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of reasons Coach Kelly could decide it's time to go.
Yeah. I wouldn't be mad at Luke Fickell. I wouldn't be mad at it. He wouldn't make my top 3.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be mad at him.
My response to Andy texted me this, and I said, man, you need to put that on the board, that in the chat. That'll be fun. And I said, I wouldn't love it, but I wouldn't hate it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But that's not, Luke Fickell's a good, Notre Dame will show up every Saturday ready to fight.
It's not a bad hire.
No.
Not a bad hire.
We'll get from Luke Fickell is minimum of what we've gotten the last 5 years from Brian Kelly from a win-loss standpoint.
Yep.
Minimum. He's a good football coach. I just don't know if Luke Fickell's the guy that's going to take you to the next level.
Yeah.
And I'm still curious how he's going to recruit without Marcus Freeman. I don't know the answer to that. So, a lot of the dudes building that team right now are guys that were recruited by, especially on defense, or guys that were recruited by Marcus Freeman and Mike Mickens. So I'm very curious how that would go. Okay, top 5. Let's hear it. Top 3 to 5 candidates. You're the AD. Brian Kelly just announced he's retiring. Who's your 5? My 5 is gotten much easier in recent weeks.
I'm calling Jeff Brom.
Mm-hmm. That would be the one that you and I have.
Yes, we have that in common. I'm calling Jeff Brom. Definitely. I would actually have a discussion with Marcus Freeman.
Mm-hmm.
That's easy. And then from there, see, this is where I get into personal preference. I actually like James Franklin.
Ooh.
I know a lot of people don't like James Franklin.
Hey, Sean, can you carry the next couple minutes? I need to run over to the restroom real quick and throw up. So just give me a minute.
But no, let me give you why. I'm not saying he makes my top 3.
Okay.
But I definitely will send out some fillers and talk to him because I have so much respect for the culture he created out of what was there at Penn State. That can't be overlooked. The same way LSU probably looks at Mel Tucker and they'll watch from the outside saying, man, you know what? I'll be honest with you. Andy, I'm talking to Jeff Brown and Marcus Freeman because they're head and shoulders above everybody else. They just are. And those are probably the 2 that I will probably choose from. And then on the outskirts, you would have Luke Fickell, you would have James Franklin.
Matt Campbell's the guy that everyone's going to talk about.
I've kind of soured on Matt Campbell just a little bit because I haven't really seen the progression. And I know he doesn't have the talent. But I just expected more from them offensively with what they had coming back this year. And that's been a disappointment to me. I knew they would compete. I knew they would play hard. They're going to be a tough game for Oklahoma.
They're going to pull off another upset this season.
Yeah,
but I think that's who he is.
That's who he is.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's like, am I bringing that to Notre Dame?
Right.
Or am I getting somebody that can come to Notre Dame and take the program to the next level? Because it's not about whether or not you can win. There are a lot of coaches that can probably come in here and win. What 1 or 2 coaches can come in and make or help Notre Dame take that next step, which is the most difficult step in coaching, going from being able to win consistently to being that elite national championship contender on an annual basis, a true contender. So, man, let me tell you something. The way schematically that Jeff Brom took apart Iowa on Saturday was brilliant.
You think about what he could do with Notre Dame's talent.
He had no scholarship running backs. So the running game was just taken away
because
from
his walk-on starting running back was also hurt.
Yes. So going into the game, I have nothing. I have nothing. And then he comes out, he plays 3 quarterbacks and ends up going with the walk-on quarterback. And David Bell, I think the last 3 times he's faced Iowa, has gone for like 535 yards or something ridiculous like that.
Their David Bell plan sucks.
Oh, man. It sucks. And it makes you appreciate what Cam Hart was able to do when he lined up across from him. You know, and that's what we're saying going back to the previous question. Like, if we give up 24 points, you need to go watch this USC offense. Like, that's a pretty darn good job for a defense if you give up 24 points. And it's the way. If you give up 24 points in the first 2 quarters, then okay. That's something to worry about. But if you jump out to a big lead and they score a couple of late touchdowns, that's totally different. You dominated the game, and you should feel good about those 24 points. So those are my 2. I'm interested in hearing your top 3. I know we agree on 1.
We agree on 1. I was soured on Coach Brom because I thought he underachieved the last couple of years. And I thought he made some bad hires on defense. But he quickly rectified that mistake and got rid of Bob Diaco after 1 year and went out and whatever he did he's got like 3 co-coordinators or something ridiculous like that. And whatever he's doing, it's working.
Yeah.
Because they're a legitimately good defense. But they got to keep winning. You know, in the second half of the season, you've got Wisconsin at home, Michigan State at home, Indiana at home, Northwestern and neutral field, at Ohio State, at Nebraska. You've got to go at least 8-4.
Yeah.
You know, for me. But offensive genius, he's just got to show that he can kind of take that next step, in my opinion. Here's my calls. I got two non-traditional hires, two non-traditional interviews, 2 normal ones, and then a coordinator. The coordinator's Marcus Freeman. I'm Marcus Freeman would get a legitimate interview from me. He would get legitimate consideration.
Yeah,
because I would think of, do we really want to mess up what we're building here? And maybe it's a year or two early, but
that's part of the reason Luke Fickell probably wouldn't make sense,
right? Because
like
you're going to not have Marcus Freeman for very long. I mean, you got to understand that. Are you willing to realize that you're not going to Marcus Freeman beyond next season, no matter who you bring in?
Right.
Because he's gonna leave. So that's something you have to consider. And so the two non-traditional calls I'm making are John Harbaugh, Baltimore Ravens, and Bob.
That's a real comfortable spot he's in.
Yeah,
in Baltimore. Yeah.
Yep. And then the other one is Bob Stoops. I'm giving Bob a call. I got to find out if the fire's still in the belly, but from what I've been told by sources is those are two guys that would definitely listen if Notre Dame came calling.
You know what? The Bob Stoops, I like it.
Because he's still young.
I wasn't thinking that route, but I like it. And I always like when coaches can take a step away from the game and immediately get into analyzing games and looking at the game from a different perspective. Kind of like Urban, what he did. And then he went back to Ohio State, rejuvenated.
Yeah.
Stoops
left Oklahoma in a pretty good place.
Yes.
For Lincoln. And he's still young he's 61. That's not young, but I mean, that's I would need to find out if the fire's still there. No. I think his brother's a great coach at that level.
Okay.
I don't think Mark is a Notre Dame coach.
Okay.
Is what I would say. I think he's more of Kentucky, Tennessee, Florida State. Notre Dame's a different animal.
Yeah.
The other thing I like about Bob Stoops is he's always been he's a defensive coordinator. He's a defensive coordinator when Florida won their title. He was a defensive coordinator at Kansas State under Bill Snyder. Yet he's always been an innovative offensive guy, meaning he's always looking to hire innovative offensive minds, whether it was Mike Leach and Mike Mangino as part of the same staff when he won the title, going out and seeing what Lincoln Riley was doing at East Carolina and saying, I want that guy. You know what I mean? And I like that about him. It's just, I would need to know that the fire's in the belly again for him to do all the things that come with being a head coach, recruiting, all that kind of stuff. That would be my concern, but I would bring him in for sure. Jeff Brom's another one. There's another coach that's now on my radar that was not coming into the season because he just had no experience, and that's Dave Aranda. I listened to Dave Aranda's post-game press conference at Baylor after their win this weekend, and I'm like, oh my God, if that's not like a Notre Dame coach, right? Like something you should hear from a Notre Dame coach talking about control of mastery of self and really intellectual, but yet his team plays hard. I look at his experience. He's a Northern guy, Dave Aranda, in a lot of his coaching experiences, yet he also coached at LSU. He's shown that he can kind of coach that elite athlete and all that comes with it. Northern guy, meaning he's coached, Wisconsin. He's actually a West Coast guy.
Yeah.
So he's got those connections. I mean, he's coached all over the country. He even coached at Cal Lutheran like 3 years before I coached against Cal Lutheran, which is kind of interesting, but coached at Texas Tech, coached at Houston, coached at Southern Utah, coached at Hawaii, coached at Utah State, coached at Wisconsin, and then now he's coached at LSU and Baylor in his last two gigs. Did a phenomenal job at Wisconsin, did a good job at LSU as the D coordinator, and the job he's done at Baylor the last 2 years, I mean, went 2-7 in year one, inherited a team that lost a ton from Matt Rule's last year, because Matt Rule came to Baylor saying, I'm going to turn this team around and spin it into another job. And he recruited like someone that had no intention of being there beyond, 3-4 years. And now they're 6-1. They're a good offensive team. They're a really good defensive team, and they're not doing it with very good players, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I really like the job he's done. He's on my list. Plus, I don't know. I just have always liked the idea of having a really smart, intellectual coach coaching at Notre Dame. It's like if Ty Willingham was actually a good coach, right? That's like that because I'm talking about the way he talked.
Yes.
And it was half of it was dude, just shut up. You're not even making any sense. But Dave Aranda actually makes sense. And and I really like what he brings to the table. Now, they got to finish strong, just like Brom, just like Mel Tucker, but he's on my list. More so than I see more upside there than Matt Campbell, even a Luke Fickell, to be honest with you. And I like the fact that he's coached. I mean, how many coaches have that kind of all over the country resume?
Yeah.
Because, and again, at Notre Dame, that's important. He can walk down to
you have to
he
recruit.
can walk, Sean, he can walk down to those studs in LSU, in Louisiana and Florida and Georgia and say, hey, remember me?
Mm-hmm.
Guess where I'm at now.
Yeah.
Right? He can do that in Texas. He can do that out in California. That's so important at a place like Notre Dame. So that's my 5. That's my 5.
I like that 5. Aranda would probably get my 3rd spot. My 3rd interview.
Yeah.
He would probably get my 3rd interview.
You got to go listen to the interview he did after the game this past week.
I'll check it out.
Yeah, you have
I'll check it out. Let me ask you something. At some point, everybody, we talked about this, the perception of how wonderful these SEC jobs are. You're down in Florida, you're down in Alabama, you're down in Louisiana. If Notre Dame gave Dan Mullen a call, you would say there's no way he leaves Florida. And in my mind, I'm like, why wouldn't you?
He's a northern guy.
He's a northern guy.
He's from Pennsylvania, yeah.
Pennsylvania, which is strong Catholic background, especially during his time when he grew up. And it's like, you've built what you've built in Florida. How close do you really believe you are? I mean, you almost beat Alabama, but then you're going to lose to LSU.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just don't know if he's going to get that program to the point where they are. Maybe he's just trying to outweight Nick Saban as he leaves. Right. We don't know how long that is. But if he came to Notre Dame, Dan Mullen would be a superstar.
I don't agree. I don't. I don't. I mean, I hope that I would. I'm a big Dan Mullen fan. I just don't think he fits well at Notre Dame. And
now,
there's some other things.
Coaching standpoint or the outside?
Outside.
Gotcha.
So Dan Mullen's a heck of a football coach, in my opinion.
Gotcha.
I think he's a heck of a football coach. I don't think he'd fit at Notre Dame in a lot of other ways.
Gotcha.
That'd be my reason. Because I don't think every great coach is a great coach at every school. Some are. Those are the legends. Luke could win anywhere. Urban could win anywhere. Saban can win anywhere.
Saban can win anywhere. Yeah.
Not every coach is that way. So it's like I mean, we've seen it. Tom O'Brien, great coach at Boston College, terrible at NC State. Randy Edsel did some great things at UConn, awful at Maryland. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. Not every great coach is a great coach everywhere.
And Notre Dame is very unique.
Very unique.
Very unique.
I don't know if Coach Mullen has the temperament there, and I think there's some other things that would just make it hard for that to work.
Yeah.
But if it was just about football, Sean, I would not disagree with you. I think guy's a heck of a football coach. And I think he would I think the kind of kids he likes to recruit would he'd have more success in Notre Dame than he's had at Florida from a recruiting standpoint, in my opinion. I think because he likes to build a roster not just with highly ranked guys. He understands the need for program guys too and tough kids and all that. I think there's some other things that would make it tough for me.
Typical.
Yeah, so just so I'm clear, it's not a football coaching thing.
Oh, I got you.
For him. Irish for life. And by the way, all full disclosure, I'm a huge Dan Mullen fan. He's a guy that was very instrumental in my early development as a coach. I mean, he spent time with me when he's at Bowling Green, helped me drills and talked football with me and taught me a lot. And when I spent some time with that Bowling Green staff. So it's not personal. I think he's a heck of a football coach. I don't know if Notre Dame would be the best fit for him. Irish for life. Hi, all IB Nation. God bless you all. Praying for a great win on Saturday. We all are doing that for sure. Timeout, Tom. Assuming Diggs is ready to be the running back, what do you think? What do you think about Tyree lining up on the slot next year? He'd be explosive and getting the ball in open spaces. I would be very much against that as a full-time move. Number one, Kyron Williams will not be at Notre Dame next year. I would be shocked if Kyron Williams is back in Notre Dame next year. You need more than one running back. And I love Logan Diggs, but I mean, Chris Tyree is a running back. He's not a wide receiver. Can you use him in the slot? Yeah, they should be doing that more. Absolutely. Is he a slot receiver? No, I don't think. Not in this offense. No. In Chip Kelly's offense at Oregon back in 2011, could he have played in the slot? Yeah. Yeah, he could have done a lot of things the Anthony Thomas did, but he's not He's not a slot receiver.
Yeah, we have Malik pretty much called Logan Diggs Baby T because he reminds me of Torian Folston.
Yeah. I mean, I'd call him Daddy T because he's bigger than Torian.
Yeah, but the way they move,
yeah.
He watched him run against Virginia Tech. He's like, oh man, he reminds me of Torian.
Yeah, great feet. I think if I were to look at other Notre Dame backs, I mean, just that not an explosive guy, but just phenomenal balance and feet. I think Torian's one.
Yeah.
Lee Becton's another.
Oh, good call.
Bigger bodied guy.
Good call.
So yeah, Malik's still a little young.
He can't go back
he's
that
not
far.
old like he's not doing Lee Becton flashbacks like you and I are. Yeah, he's a good player though. But no, I would like to see both of them still in the backfield. Eric 1863. Oh, D-Rock's hoping to see a little Sebo and Estime action this weekend. I don't think we'll see both of them. We'll see one of them, but not both of them. Eric 1863. How is Notre Dame with Caden Proctor? That's a 2023 offensive lineman that's from the same high school, Xavier Nwankpa. I believe he's going to be on campus with Xavier Nwankpa. Also, any visitors back out or not on campus that you wish were seems like a big weekend. I haven't really looked yet at who showed up or not, and some guys aren't going to determine they're not coming until tomorrow. But, for me, I think with all the uncertainty on the offensive line, the rumblings coming from other people, I had somebody call me up, say, hey, I heard that you said that Jeff Quinn's not going to be back next year. I'm like, this is how it goes, man. I never said any such thing. So, but there are rumblings and there are people that I trust and respect that have said that they are hearing that he won't be back next year. I don't have that intel at this point in time. I'd be a little shocked if Brian Kelly got rid of him. Do I think there's a possibility he's not coaching the O-line? Yeah, I think there is. And anytime you have a coaching change like that, it really doesn't matter where you are with the recruit at that point in time. It's about where it's the bond that the new coach can build. So honestly, I'm not paying a whole lot of attention to 2023 offensive line recruiting at this point in time. I will say this, however, Caden Proctor likes Notre Dame a lot. Do I think they're his leader? No. Do I think if he were to come out with a top 5 in the next month, would they be in there? I would imagine so. That's a good place to start. It's a good place to start.
Is USC still the biggest recruiting weekend?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. For 2022, yeah.
No, I'm just saying, like, traditionally.
Oh, yeah. Every time they got USC at home, it's always a night game. I mean, think about it. Every single home game against USC in the Brian Kelly era has been a night game. It's been a big recruit. And even going back to the first one of 2011, I mean, they had we're talking about these, they had Zach Banner, Josh Garnett, Deontay Green. I mean, that was a huge recruiting weekend, and they fell flat. I don't remember 2013 because I was not covering the team that year. I was coaching that year, so I can't speak on that. But it was a night game. I do know it was a night game.
Yeah.
15, it was a big recruiting weekend. 17, it was a big recruiting weekend. 19 was a big recruiting weekend. So, yeah, it is still the big recruiting weekend, especially when they have West Coast kids. And
now, is that an advantage? The biggest recruiting weekend for Ohio State is when they get Michigan at home, right? At the end of the year. With your biggest recruiting weekend being in the middle of the season, is that a disadvantage? Or how do you, especially when you're talking about the difference makers, or does it not matter because most difference makers are going to wait anyway?
Yeah, I don't think it's a disadvantage. I think it's late enough where you're going to get one of the final couple officials.
Yeah.
I'd get nervous. It was like September, 11th this year, that second game of the year. And like, okay, these kids you're the first official for these kids. They're going to take 4 more.
Right.
So I think it's timed perfectly. Plus, I don't know if Notre Dame necessarily wants to be bringing kids from all over the country onto campus for a December home game.
I mean, and their counter to Ohio State possibly having that late visit with the Michigan game is the banquet weekend. Now, the banquet weekend was always traditionally huge for Notre Dame.
And you remember when we were kids, Sean, the banquet weekend was, they had maybe 2 or 3 commits by the time the banquet came. I mean, all your recruits came, but by now it's like everyone's already signed by the time the banquet comes.
Right.
I mean, or they're about to sign in a week, depending on when the banquet is. So, no, I don't think it hurts. It's a good question, though. Got some predictions. Searcher Green 31-24 Irish. D-Rock 28-24 Irish. Nita Walsh says Notre Dame is O-line U. Southern Cal, love that, Southern Cal, is known for defense. That is why they are the safety school. I love it. All right, Michael says, hey, Brian, let's talk Notre Dame recruiting and the importance of this weekend. I think we covered that at the beginning. This is a huge, huge weekend. John Keevers asked, will there be any available merch at the tailgate? There will not be any available merch at the tailgate. You can order stuff. We can kind of go online and order stuff, but no, I will not have any merch available for this. Honestly, with the turnout that we had last time, it just was kind of like, I don't want to buy 30 hats and 30 shirts and 10 people show up.
Right.
You know, I got bills to pay too. I got to make smart investments. So maybe if things change this time, the next time we have a tailgate, it might be a little bit of a different story. Eric says, I believe Notre Dame wins 35-24 with a USC score late to make it close, but not really. Let's go Irish. Nita Walsh said, BK talked about Rocco yesterday. Sounds like he's going to decide which 4 games he'll play. I think it's absolutely silly to redshirt Rocco Spindler. Mm-hmm. If you think Rocco Spindler's a 5-star player, it shows me that Coach Kelly has not really adopted the idea that this is 2021. Mm-hmm. Kids can transfer whenever the heck they want, and there's no consequences.
Right.
You don't redshirt top 100 caliber players, elite caliber players, especially ones that you spent the whole freaking spring running on the first team. You know, I mean, that was just a horrible decision to do that, and then don't play him because hold on. Especially with the absolute cluster, you know what we've seen on the offensive line this year. He's thinking, wait a minute, I can't even get on the field because of that. And now you're admitting you're trying to redshirt the kid.
Yeah.
It just seems, I mean, you should be starting the kid before you should be redshirting him. I'm not saying you should start him, but if those are the two options, start him or redshirt him, start him.
He knows he's on the practice field. Like you're not playing him at the expense of who?
Yeah, you're playing that guy over me? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Hunterland asks, if there is an opening for a new O-line coach, who would be your top 3 to 5 for the job? I really don't have a top 3 to 5 right now, mainly because there's 20, 25 offensive line coaches that would be really good coaches. And it's not like just 3 or 5. You know, there's some names that are names of people thrown out. I honestly haven't spent a second really thinking about that. That's a little different than like a head coaching conversation. There's a lot of good coaches out there. And all I care about Brian Kelly is hire good ones. He had 3 really good ones interviewed the last time, and he didn't hire any of them. You're just go find a good coach. And it doesn't have to be like, hey, I could give you Bill Bedenbaugh from Oklahoma. You know, I could name you like the 3 best O-line coaches in football and be like, hire that guy, but they've already got pretty darn good jobs.
Right.
It's about finding a guy that can do a great job, whether it's a younger guy, an older guy, or someone in the middle. Just find a great coach that can recruit and coach his butt off. And I would actually say the other way around. Coach his butt off and recruit. For the offensive line, coaching's most important.
Yep.
Can coach and recruit. Do that, and I don't really care who it is or where he came from. I mean, Michigan hired a guy, Sharon Moore, right? I'm trying to look up his I remember looking at his resume and thinking, are you kidding me? This guy was a tight ends coach at Michigan for 3 years. And then before that, he was at Central Michigan for 4 years. In Louisville, he never coached the offensive line before. The last time he was associated with the offensive line, he was playing offensive line at Oklahoma back in 2007. I'm thinking that's a stupid hire. Like that guy, and he's done a phenomenal job. That's a well-coached, hard-playing offensive line that has a bunch of players that Notre Dame said, nah, you're not good enough to play for us. So, hey, look, you find a guy that can coach and recruit. I don't really give a rip where he's coming from. That's what
I know the trend that Nick Saban likes to use. Nick Saban loves to use coaches that were fired, that went to the NFL, and now they want to come back to college football.
Yeah. So last 2 offensive line coaches for sure, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the one before that was an offensive line coach that had been fired as a head coach.
As a head coach.
At the college level, Mario Cristobal.
Yep.
Yeah. I kind of like the idea of trying to find a guy, whether it's that you think will actually be here for a while. That'd be my only issue with like a Doug Marrone, for example, is I feel like Doug Marrone's going to coach a couple years and get a better gig and be on the road. Okay, timeout, Tom, especially against USC. Notre Dame needs to get Foskey and Patojo both on the field together, rushing from opposite edges. I wouldn't mind seeing that. Yeah. John A1 also has a comment on the Happy Friday IB. How can Notre Dame get Patojo going? Let him rush quarterback. I haven't really been put him on the field and let him rush quarterback. I mean, this would be a game for that. I wouldn't mind seeing snaps where you've got Foskey, Adamiola, and Myron Tungvalo on the field together, or replace one of them with Heinisch, but make sure that Adamiola and Foss once. Either Foskey, Adamiola, and Heinisch, or Foskey, Adamiola, and Myron Tungvalo with with Botelho as kind of that hybrid linebacker guy. If you want to do that, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Just don't ask.
I think we'll see more opportunity for Botelho to rush the passer because of the types of offenses they're about to play.
Yeah. And look, he was away from the team for a while this summer.
He was.
That's just a fact.
Yeah.
And he's still playing catch up.
Yep.
I mean, and so I hope that the second half of the year is an opportunity to get him going on that. Michael asked, Brian, with the recent Indy quarterback opting for the transfer portal, how important is it now that Notre Dame gets a second quarterback in the 2022 class? I'm of the belief that Notre Dame needs a second quarterback. Thanks. Well, they need another quarterback, whether it's a second quarterback in 2022 or a grad transfer that comes from a school where he's not really concerned about starting as much. But look, there are kids out there saying, look, I'm not an NFL quarterback. I'll come. I want to get a degree from Notre Dame. You know, I would find a kid like that, and say, hey, look, we don't have a starting job available. So, I mean, it's not going to be like Spencer Rattler. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about some kid that plays at Harvard or some kid that plays at Stanford or some kid that plays at, school like that. That's a good player, or a kid that's playing at a smaller school. It's a good player that isn't an NFL guy. Say, look, come play for us for a year and, get your degree. That's another option as well. If you can't find the right fit, because you can't just take a number, just a kid just to have a body.
No,
you can't do that because then you've wasted a scholarship.
Wasted a scholarship, right?
If you're gonna quote unquote waste a scholarship per se, I would rather be on a grad transfer that's gonna be gone at the end of the year, and then you can rectify your depth in other ways in that regards.
And that's all about the evaluation of the quarterback room they currently have.
Right.
He'll be back next season. If you really feel like Tyler Buckner is going to be your guy, Drew Pine behind him, it's no need to waste a scholarship. You go and you swing for the fences in 2023. Right. Couple of difference makers in that class, and let's just go from there.
If you're going to get a 2022 quarterback, he's got to be a really, really good one.
Yes.
And he can't, and a guy that you're okay possibly losing out on Dante Moore or Nico for.
Yep.
That's the reality of it.
That's the reality.
Felix Fournier, Eli Raridon getting a major bump by 247. Did you have the chance to watch the senior tape? Yes, I have. I mean, look, I graded him out as a top 200 player, I believe, when they got him. So I'm very high on him. I think he is a very good football player. I don't know if I would necessarily jump him up all the way to number 64 in the country, but I'll take it because he's a really good football player. So, I mean, he was never a 3-star. I mean, that's a fact. And now people, I think, are recognizing it. I mean, I thought he got better as a senior, like most kids get better as a senior. I didn't think he all of a sudden looked like a guy that wasn't really good before. I think he was always kind of that, and they're just now coming around to it. Nolan Ziegler also got jumped into the top 25, which means Notre Dame, 13 of their 21 commits are ranked in the top 250 by 247 Sports. That's really good. And all but one of them, Ziegler, are in the top 200. That's really good. All right, John Erickson asks, with advent of transfer portal, might Cincinnati be the last high-ranked team loaded with returning seniors we ever see in college football again? Thoughts, Brian? No, I don't think so. I mean, you're always going to see the kids that are going to be leaving are kids who aren't playing.
Right.
A guy that's starting at guard for Notre Dame who is going to stay starting at guard at Notre Dame isn't leaving to go to Indiana. The guy the starting guard that's going to leave Notre Dame to go to Indiana is the guy that's like, by the way, you're going to have to battle for your job this spring. And, I mean, that's just the reality. You're going to lose your depth. You're not going to lose your starters. I mean, yeah. Now Cincinnati might, teams like Cincinnati, it may be harder because you may lose an Ahmed Gardner after his second year. He may just transfer to Bama or something like that. But you're still going to see plenty of players that stay. It's not going to be like that. It's not going to be like basketball. It's not. There's just too many kids. It's not going to be that way. And what's going to happen is the one thing that's going to somewhat stem the tide of all these kids leaving is all these kids that got left without teams to play for this year. And it's going to get worse, in my opinion, moving forward. So that's kind of.
And I always wonder who's advising the kids, right? Because we see kids all the time that stick around and finally get an opportunity and make the best of it. And that goes back to the culture, right? Because you would have to think, look at Alvin Kamara, for example. Eventually ended up in Tennessee. But when you look at the running backs that were in that class or at Alabama at the time he was there, there's no way you could sit there and say, well, man, why weren't they playing Alvin Kamara? It was like, it was very clear why he couldn't get on the field. Didn't mean he wasn't good. It just meant like it was a very talented running back room. And if you're an elite program that recruits really well, you're going to have those bumper to bumper, traffic jams in a particular room, whether it's wide receiver. Like the best wide receiver for Alabama this year couldn't get on the field at Ohio State. Just couldn't get on the field. And I mean, that happens.
Talking about Jameson Williams.
Jameson Williams. And that happens. So the transfer portal definitely, when it was created for those opportunities. Guys that are good, that see the opportunity for them to have more playing time rather than staying and waiting. Because most kids come into college, let's just be real. Most kids that have NFL aspirations don't come to college saying, I'm staying for 4 years.
Right.
They just don't. Like if they have NFL aspirations, year 3, as soon as they can become eligible, that's what they're shooting for. After year 3, they want to enter into the draft and start their professional career. So I don't think top-notch high school players, when they come to college, are even thinking about staying for 4 years. That's a very special. What we saw with Clemson when their entire defensive line came back and Christian Wilkins came back, like that's very unique. Like that doesn't happen. And they ended up winning the national championship, but that was just a situation where that entire defensive line could have gone into the draft after their junior year. And they just decided to come back and play to win the national championship, and they finished it out. That's very rare, especially in these days.
So let's get to a couple more here, Sean, as we roll through these. Noah Niedershaw says, I wish people talked more about how huge and ridiculous Kevin Austin's catch was for the 2-point conversion against Virginia Tech. We talked about this on the message board because people were saying, like, I don't think Jack Cohn was thrown to him. I think he's thrown to George Takis. And then I showed a video that Notre Dame put out where it's clear he looks left, sees him. But in that video, you can see Austin grab it, and the guy puts his face on him and pulls him down by his face, and he still hangs on to it. Phenomenal catch. But we did talk about that on the message board, Noah. That's why you need to be part of all of our platforms, because we can't talk about everything on every single platform. But that was a phenomenal. He gets a 10 for clutchness and a 10 for difficulty, for me. Let's see here. Timeout Tom. If Notre Dame moves quickly after the season with a new O-line coach, what are the chances of Notre Dame flipping Carson Hinsman? Well, the chances of them flipping Carson Hinsman are 0 because he's not committed anywhere. I'm being a little bit, sarcastic here. Right now, if they moved quickly, they'd have a shot, but they'd have to move quickly because the current staff just butchered that whole recruitment. And there's a lot of love for Notre Dame, but there's also now some burned bridges because of the lack of communication. They just dropped him and just said, stop talking to him. There was no, hey, listen, we're going in a different direction, or here's the problem. It's just see ya. And so a new O-line coach would have to have some previous connection with him. But I do know him and his family loved Notre Dame. And if they wouldn't have dropped the ball on that, they would have him in the class right now, in my opinion. So, but it is what it is. Ryan Gavin, if Carmody gets snaps at tight end, Reese can unveil their secret weapon, 14 personnel.
That's funny. That's funny.
I'm going to cry if that happens. Patrick Quinlan, any chance we see Audric Estime this year? We'll see him in 4 games. Again, also, well, actually, no, I take that back because he's already played, I think, more than 4 games because he's played special teams, right? Yeah. So I think he's played more than 4 already. So hopefully we see him. I just, it just blows my whatever. I don't get into that. Searcher Green says, not sure about hiring a 14 and 12 coach. Talking about Mel Tucker. If I was Tucker, I'd go after. If I was LSU, I'd go after Billy Napier over Tucker. Here's kind of my issue about that is you could say, okay, well, Billy Napier has a better resume than Mel Tucker from a head coaching standpoint, but that resume was built at Louisiana Lafayette, and he's 34 and 12 at Louisiana Lafayette. It's a little different than taking over a garbage Colorado program and then a Michigan State program that's in a dumpster fire. But it's also not – this is the thing. You have to go past just the record as a coach. It's also about his overall resume. And yes, Billy Napier coached at Alabama too, but Mel Tucker was a D coordinator in the SEC. He was a coach on multiple championship teams or teams that played in championships. He's got NFL experience as a coach. Mm-hmm. Those things all factor into the overall resume, not just because one guy has one extra year and a better record at Lafayette compared to what the other guy has done in the Pac-12 and the Big Ten, taking over non-traditional programs. So that's why I would somewhat push back a little bit on that, just because I don't think you can compare. And I like Billy Napier, and if I was LSU, I would absolutely have him on my radar. So this isn't an anti Billy Napier comment, because I'm quite high on Billy Napier, but I don't feel it shouldn't be that simple. And Mel Tucker's not being looked at so hard because he was 14-12. He's being looked at because of what he did before he was head coach, and the resume before that, in my opinion. So that's my thoughts on that. Scott Yerbick, a couple others above, asked the question I was going to ask. Stole your thunder, Scott. Chief Brody says, I can't see Mel Tucker leaving Michigan State after one season. He didn't. This is his second year at Michigan State. I could see him leaving after 2 years. If he values LSU's job the way that the media values the LSU job, I completely get it. If he's willing to bet on himself that I think if I stay here, a better job can come available. Like, I don't know, let's say there's a job in Tuscaloosa coming open in 2 or 3 years. You have a connection there. There's no heir apparent there. Maybe you might want to be a little more patient, but you got to bet on yourself. You have to bet that you're going to be able to keep winning at Michigan State to do that. And that's not easy when you're in a league with Ohio State, Michigan State, Iowa, Wisconsin, and et cetera. Okay. Michael says, recruits speak very highly of Tommy Rees, and he relates very well with the younger generation. So far, yeah, he has. I mean, look, we've been talking about this for months. That's the one thing Tommy Rees is definitely doing well, is recruiting, in my opinion. But you can't do it all by yourself. I don't care who you are. You have to have other assistants doing a better job.
Yeah. That's been the issue, right? They haven't had that rope where everyone's tied together, pulling on the same rope. From a recruitment standpoint, you've had one or two guys doing the bulk of the work that were the stars of the staff. And I think right now they're at a better place than they've been in totality of everybody being connected. There are a couple of spots that could probably put in a little bit more work, but I'm definitely the recruiting cycle for 2022, 2020, 2023. As an Irish fan, you have to be very, very excited about how those cycles are looking and what he's been able to do.
And if he can get some better recruiting help this offseason, I think that's only going to make him more dangerous.
Yeah.
Searcher Green says, Tucker can rebuild a team. LSU doesn't need rebuilt. They just need a good coach. I'm going to disagree with that a little bit. Something y'all have to understand. All the dudes that led that team to a title 2 years ago, with maybe a couple exceptions, are gone.
Gone.
I mean, gone. The coaches are gone. The players are gone. They need rebuilt. And rebuilding isn't just about getting, changing over your roster. It's about rebuilding your culture.
Yeah.
And if half of the things are true, because I remember saying something a week ago, I was like, kids love playing for Coach O. And then I've read some stories about what it's been like the last 2 years, and I was wrong. I was still working off of what he had been. And I mean, that's a holy moly. I can't believe you know what I mean? It's but that takes, you got to rebuild. It doesn't take time. I was going to say it takes time. You need to take the time to rebuild that. And that doesn't mean it happens all over a long period of time. The right coach can fix it now, and LSU starts winning now. But there are also some positions on that team that don't look like they did 2 years ago. They just don't. And because they haven't recruited that well last couple of years, in my opinion. So I do think they need a rebuild. But I also think you say Tucker can rebuild a team. Just because that's what he's done doesn't mean that's all he can do.
Well, think about what you're saying. He can rebuild a team. I mean, is that a slight?
Well, I think it's more of a the people look at it and say, well, a coach that's going to rebuild is looking to go about business a different way. It's about the long game.
Yeah.
Whereas another guy, you bring him in and we're going to win right now. And I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. With some coaches, I mean, look, I think you and I both know some coaches are good at this place was a dumpster fire. I'm going to turn it around, but there's only a certain level I can get it to.
Right.
And then there's other coaches that come in and say, hey, I'm coming in here because you want to win. You're not bringing me in here for a 10-year rebuild. You're bringing me in here to win. Other coaches I'm bringing this guy in because our program's hit rock bottom. We need him to build it back up and hopefully get there. So I think there's the good coaches can do both. And just because the guy's only done one thing so far doesn't mean that's all he can do.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if you saw the press conference for Brett Bielema this week that was controversial, where he basically threw
Lovie Smith. I did. You sent that to me.
He basically threw Lovie Smith under the bus, in my opinion, and publicly talked about his players not being good enough with it. I've never seen a college coach at that level do
not that bluntly.
Not that bluntly.
Yeah,
absolutely. And when you rebuild, I think it shows not only that you can stop the culture that was permeating, but establish a winning culture and a winning mindset in players that previously were in the other direction. That's impressive to me. Now it's all about, can you recruit to back up that winning culture, to continue that winning culture? And that's something you have to stay 3 to 5 years to really see the results on the field, which is why I think he needs to stay at Michigan State.
Right.
And it goes to your point. Like, that's not to say that he can't take Michigan State to the level that D'Antoni took them to, or get Michigan State, that program, back to that level. But the one thing I know he can do, and he's done it at Colorado, and he's done it at Michigan State, is that he can put together a darn good staff.
And he can recruit.
Like, if you can do those two things, I'm willing to say that you can take a winning program to the next level.
It's to me, it's you're higher on Mel Tucker than I am. Simply because of what you just said. He's never been anywhere long enough as an assistant or a head coach to show me that he can build long term. That sometimes that's because you're a good, coveted coach who never is anywhere long enough because people are always looking to promote you.
Right.
That's kind of my issue there. But I think at the end of the day, I've felt this. I said this about Clark Lee when they hired him as the D coordinator. I say it about a lot of coaches. Sean, you know this, man. I don't care what your resume says. If you got the chops, you got the chops.
Sure,
if you can coach, you can coach.
Yep.
And that's the thing you got to figure out. If you're LSU's group, can he coach? Can he recruit? Can he develop? Can he do all those things? That's going to be the question. So we got some more questions. I got bumped, so I lost a lot of questions. If you send in a super chat before this one from B Place, please let me know. Don't send the super chat again, but send the question again, and I will certainly get to that. So Sean can't see the question, so he can't pull them up. So it's just kind of me. So I apologize. That's why I didn't go down in the super chats earlier, because I knew I'd get bumped. So I tried to get as many as I could, but I have now officially been bumped. But B Place says, hope everyone is having a great Friday. B Place also just signed up for the message board, by the way. So you all should join him. USC week, really fired up. Defense is the key. We need to bring the pressure and create chaos, play physical. That's exactly the recipe. Because what's Notre Dame good at? One thing we know they're good at on defense, Sean, enforce turnovers. Yep. What's the one thing USC's been bad at on offense? Turning the ball over.
Turnovers.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if you create chaos, you will create turnovers.
But how much? Now, see, I discussed this with Vince. How much? I think Marcus Freeman blitzed as much as he did against Virginia Tech because he knew his guys were tired and he was trying to create.
His front was gassed.
Yeah, his front was gassed and he was trying to create that pressure. I think they're rejuvenated. I think this front four now gets after Keaton Slovis. I don't think he has to blitz as much as probably as he did against Virginia Tech. And defensively, I'm very interested in seeing how he uses Cam Hart and Kyle Hamilton this game. And because most people will say Cam Hart, you got Drake London, right? Stay with him all night. And in my thinking, they're going to target Drake London. It doesn't matter who is sticking them. They're going to target Drake London 15 times. That's just been their track record. They throw the ball to Drake London.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking, well, maybe you put Clarence Lewis on them and you bracket.
Yep.
You allow Cam to take away Bryant.
Yep.
Or the other receiver. And then Cal Hamilton, you have Epps. Take him away. Because they're going to throw the ball to him anyway.
Yep.
So we're not about to waste Cam hard on him because that's not going to deter them from throwing the ball or targeting him. So it'll be very interesting to see how Marcus Freeman chooses to attack this USC defense.
And I think the one thing USC does well, Purdue does this very well, is the thing that's hard about that is they're not always going to line Drake London up at the same place.
No.
You have to have a slot plan, a field plan, and a boundary plan for him.
Yep.
And that can be challenging. And that's what makes defending a team that's got a great receiver like that difficult. But they did it against Purdue. I would argue that the weapons around Drake London are better than the weapons around David Bell, however. And
I would agree with that.
That's different.
Yeah.
Corey D said, you missed my super chat. That's what I was saying, Corey. I got bumped and missed several. I was trying to stay up so I could get more questions because I knew I was going to get bumped. So please just show that to me again, and we'll get that in there. This is a topic that kind of gets me, Sean. Chad Williams says, just saw the USA Today list of highest paid college football coaches. BK makes $2.6 million. BD, is that correct? Are there incentives that aren't included as a base salary that makes him 60th? Brian Kelly makes a lot more than $2.6 million.
Yeah.
Notre Dame is a private institution, only has to really show what they're paying him. They don't have to show anything, actually.
Right.
But I have been told by several people that his overall incentive package is like $7 million, closer to $7 million. Mac Brown, for example, for years at Texas, made $1 million from Texas because as a state school, that's all they paid him. But he had so much other money coming in because of shoe deals and TV deals and all those other kind of things. That was part of it's because, again, a coach doesn't care what his salary. If you're paying me $50 and that's all you're claiming to pay me, but I'm making $5 million because of the it's a compensation package is more important than what your salary is. Is 2.6 probably all what Notre Dame is paying him directly? Yeah. But I can say with great confidence, and I know some people that would know the answer to this that listen to the show, and if they know, they can let me know if I'm incorrect. But Brian Kelly would not be at Notre Dame this long if he was only making $2.6 million. Right? I mean, Mel Tucker's making $5.5 million at Michigan State. You really think that Brian Kelly's making half of what Mel Tucker's making at Michigan State?
Correct.
And that he would stay here if he was? No. Brian Kelly could take American Athletic Conference jobs that would pay him more than $2.6 million.
Yep.
He's not staying at Notre Dame this long to make $2.6 million. So I always kind of laugh at those because, again, there's a lot of, not gamesmanship, but there's a lot of different ways to go. Luke Fickell is $3.4 million. Do you think the head coach of Cincinnati now makes more than what Brian Kelly makes out at Notre Dame?
No.
There's a difference between private schools and state schools and what they have to report. Joe asking about head coaches. Joe Long says, what about Mac Brown? Too long in the teeth. It's not that he's too long in the teeth. He's just at the right school at his age. Yes. B Play says Tim Grunhard for O-line coach. He was my coach in high school. He is really, really smart all-around football guy. He definitely is that. There's no doubt about it. JP Buellsfeld has a super chat for us. Thank you very much for that, JP. Appreciate you very, very much. Kai S says that Bob Stoops is on record. JP, I want to make sure that we don't gloss over this. I appreciate that very much, that you are part of it, and if you've been part of this community for so long. Kai S says Bob Stoops is on record stating that Notre Dame is his dream job. This was a recent comment. He's never hidden that fact.
No.
And he was very okay. I don't know if I've ever said this publicly. Bob Stoops was actually offered the job before Brian Kelly in 2009. And he was very, very close to taking the job then. And that's when Oklahoma was rolling. Yeah. So he's always had a special, he's a Northeast Ohio Catholic, right? I've spoken at events in Northeast Ohio. It's a very strong Catholic Notre Dame community, especially amongst older people. Joe Long asks, hey, who did Zach Rice pick? Obviously not Irish, since I see no one talking about it. No, he picked Notre Dame, but it just wasn't a big – no, I'm just joking, Joe. He picked North Carolina. So I'm just kidding with you.
The old ball coach got him.
Yeah. Speaking of Mac Brown.
Right.
I'll tell you what, he's done a great – you're talking about a coach that's putting a staff together. He's putting a great staff together. I mean, I don't love his D coordinator. That's the one change he needs to make, in my opinion. I think Jay Bateman is one of the most overrated coaches in college football because they have to be competent. Huh?
He falls in line with guys that rebuilds programs.
Talking about Mac?
Yeah.
You
know, that's what they wanted him to do when they tabbed him to go to Texas. Like, come rebuild this program.
He rebuilt his own program. That's how he won a title. I mean, they had kind of gotten flat. He made some, they went away from the pro style, went to the spread, and bam.
Get Vince Young, and there you go.
Yeah. Maddie K, 55, IB Nation. Man, I cannot wait for game day. Go Irish, baby. 38-14. I'll tell you right now, if Marcus Freeman holds USC to 14 points, that is a pay raise moment.
Yeah. You can put that game on your resume tape.
Yes. Tom Chris 2488 just able to join. Keep up the good work. If Howard and Brown are both QB options, who would you rather take as the second QB this year? This is assuming Aller is a definite no and won't flip. I still am ticked off that they didn't make a earlier push for Drew Aller. Because it's funny, like, Sean, you knew my stance on him at the time. Like, this dude's a stud. Like, he's a stud. But they nitpicked him and slow played him and all this other nonsense. And when they finally realized what was obvious already, that he was a stud, it was too late, and Penn State was already all over him. He's not flipping to Notre Dame, I don't believe, unless there's a coaching change at Penn State. Of the two, I'd probably go with Walker Howard. I like Devin Brown. I don't love Devin Brown, and I don't think Devin Brown's good enough to necessarily eliminate any chance to go with the next guy. I think Devin Brown is a good player. I think he's a guy that would fit in really well at Ole Miss. If I could take one of the two, I'd take Walker Howard. I don't know if I love either one of them enough to where I'm willing to risk a 2023 Dante Moore-ish type of pickup. I don't. I
know James Franklin wish he had Drew Aller up in Iowa City.
Yes.
One Sean Clifford went down because
his inability to find a quarterback the last 4 years is concerning to me.
Yeah.
Like with Brian Kelly's just development problem. With James Franklin, it's like they can't get one. Now they got two in this class.
Yeah.
As they got Bo Prebill in this class too. It's very strange. I love this. Connor Nepper. Who is USC? 38-17. Cheers, IB Nation. Yes. Sean will not be at the tailgate on Saturday.
Not this one.
Sean has to work at ESPN Chicago on game days. So sincere apologies on that one. Drew will be there. He will definitely be there. Tony Stengel with a super chat. Thank you for that, Tony. Feel like a team like Coastal Carolina should never be in the top 15. How do you think Notre Dame would fare against teams overranked like that? I mean, I think there's a lot of people that have made that argument about American Athletic Conference teams like Cincinnati. I think that Notre Dame would – I think Notre Dame would win. I don't think it would be the blowout people think. I think Coastal has some athletes. They're really well coached, and they have a quarterback that can make a lot of plays. So I don't think it. I think we have to kind of get past this. Just because a team isn't from a Power 5 that they're not good.
Yeah.
Would I put Coastal Carolina in the top 15? Yeah, I think so. I think teams like that shouldn't be in the playoff. That's my stance. It's always been my stance. That's why I give.
Even when they expanded.
No, I'm talking about now.
Oh, now. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
To me, but then though, I would say you have to play a certain number. I mean, I have to respect your schedule, and that's why I give Cincinnati a lot of credit. Cincinnati knew they were running a risk of, hey, we play Indiana and Notre Dame on the road in back-to-back games. We run the risk of losing both.
Yeah.
But it's the only chance we have at putting together a resume to be a playoff team. But I don't think Coastal Carolina's at the point where they care about that yet. I mean, they're 2 years ago they had a losing record. Yeah. This coach he's rebuilding. He doesn't need to worry about scheduling Notre Dame and teams like that right now. He's doing a great job. Should a team like that be in the top 15? Yeah, because I think teams like that can beat a lot more teams than you think they can. I think there's not the gap there used to be 20 years ago because there's more players now. More players are willing to the transfer portal is one that helps. And then two, there's a lot more kids falling through the cracks, I think, than there used to be because there is this obsession with star rankings and things like that. You're seeing more and more coaches that obsess over that stuff to where I mean, you'd think that this wouldn't be true, Sean, but you and I both know there's a lot of Division I coaches that put a lot of emphasis on where kids are ranked. I think that's stupid, but they do. And
I want to say this as well. They didn't lose to a bad football team.
Yeah.
Appalachian State's a pretty darn good football program. Yeah. And they're 5-2. So
they're 5-2 with a 2-point road loss to Miami.
Yes.
You know, a game they led almost the whole time.
And they only beat Coastal Carolina by a field goal.
Right.
It was a very good game. So no, we have to have respect.
Was a good football team.
Look, I'll say this. When Iowa was ranked number 2, and I know I'm biased with this, and I'm sure everybody watching probably, if Iowa and Notre Dame lined up on a neutral field, I would take Notre Dame.
Yeah.
So it's like I was ranked number 2. Yeah. If in a rematch with the progression of Notre Dame at the end of the year, if they continue to trend upward, would I think that they would have a chance to beat Cincinnati the second time if they face them again?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, because Notre Dame played like garbage in that game.
Absolutely.
And still made it 17-13 in the fourth quarter. Right.
So look, we're putting too much stock in these rankings.
Yeah.
You know, big Power 5 conference, some teams are overranked.
Right.
We saw that with Iowa. And then a team like Coastal Carolina deserves to get the spotlight every now and then when they play as well as they have played the last 2 years. So I didn't see any problem with them.
Tony, I'd be a little more skeptical if they were top 10. That's where I'd start being like a little bit but in that 13 to 20 range, I have no problem with that, especially in a year like this, Tony.
Right.
In a year like this where there's just not a lot of great teams, I have no problem doing that. Where I don't want it, because those rankings ultimately don't matter. I think it's good for those programs to do that, to get that, because then maybe some kid who's on the border of, do I really want to go to NC State or North Carolina and I'm, be the number 2 running back or the number 4 receiver, or do I want to go to Coastal and be the guy? And more of those kids are going to start picking those schools if they're ranked high. Where I care about where they shouldn't be ranked is they shouldn't be ranked in the top 10 of the college football playoff. And that's exactly what we saw last year at BYU. I remember when the people at ESPN almost lost they did kind of lose their freaking minds. But they blew a gasket when BYU wasn't ranked in the top 10 because they're like, oh, they're going to be close, or how close are they going to be to the top 4? And I'm like, they beat nobody. And then who brought BYU back to earth?
Coastal Carolina.
Yep. There you go. So I like that program. D-Rock says, BK's resistance to change is why I feel we will have a close game to USC. I hope that you are wrong. But I can't say that I necessarily disagree with you. And were definitely several super chats I missed. If we missed, please get them to us. I think that I saw one from Patrick Barnes and a couple other people. Because I can see your picture at the top that says the super chat came, but please resend those if you can.
D-Rock, I would disagree with you because the lack of resistance on the defensive side of the ball for USC is probably just as bad.
But you can argue that Toledo was bad and Virginia Tech's not very good, and I think but Sean is an eternal optimist, and that's one of the many things I love about him.
I am an eternal optimist.
You are.
This is I'm telling you, man, this USC team.
Yeah, it's not good.
It's not good.
It's really not. And I think this is the kind of team that Notre Dame's players will be up for.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, too.
Yeah.
John Rich says Brian and Sean are a great tag team, 41-23 for Notre Dame. The only team that cannot beat Notre Dame this weekend will be Notre Dame. Must protect the Rock. I think he is spot on that. If Notre Dame loses this weekend, it's not because of USC.
No,
it's because of Notre Dame. And that's exactly what happened if Notre Dame would have played against Alabama the same way they played against Cincinnati, they lost by 40.
Yeah.
Because they played terrible against Cincinnati and still had a shot to win in the fourth quarter. You make one stop and one score and you win the game.
Win the game.
Joe Long says, I like Sean, but stand up, young man. Don't always agree, but you are a good drinking bud, I bet. This is one of those hilarious responses that people give. So they think that you're just on the show to tap dance for Brian, to agree with Brian all the time. Give me a break. So I get that with Vince. Or here's a thought. Here's a crazy thought that Sean has his own opinions. He knows he's allowed to express them, which is why he's on the show without me plenty of times. Yeah. And we just happen to agree, which is, I don't know why we're friends, because we have a lot of things in common. Goodness. All right.
I'm interested in what he would want me to say.
I don't know. Maybe we should fake an argument just so people will, some people will, whatever. Anyway, moving on. Matty K, I am stoked for the second half of the season. I truly believe the bye came at the right time. Notre Dame is going to be good Saturday night and beyond. Then at least a push for New Year's Six Bowl. Sean, this speaks to what you talked about because of the fact that you did feel that Notre Dame was a tired football team against Virginia Tech.
I did, and it goes back to what I said at the beginning of the season. I think we had this conversation. Would you much rather believe that this team really has a true shot at a national championship and see them go undefeated in this schedule? Or would you rather see them actually struggle a little bit and then get better to improve upon their flaws, get to a New Year's Six Bowl, and finally win a big game in a New Year's Six Bowl? Like, which one would have more value going into the next season?
Yeah.
Just making it back to the college football playoff and getting trounced again
because you didn't make the needed changes in the middle of the season.
Exactly. Right. Or having to go through these changes, recognize the changes that need to be made, improve, become a better football team, become a better program, and catapult yourself into a real opportunity to win a national championship in 2022.
Yeah.
So that's the way it seems. I hope it's playing out that way. And I hope, me, I've said that I want Cincinnati again. I want Cincinnati really, really bad in a bowl
game. It will not be close if they play again in the postseason.
I want them really bad in the bowl game. I just really want them again. And if we can't get them, they will end up probably with an SEC team.
To me, Sean, I still believe, and I know that people think I'm nuts, and I am a little nuts, but I'm still a believer that I want to see this football team make the changes and then still get a crack at the playoff. Because I still think this is a really good football team.
I think
I don't think people realize
15%. I think the last time I saw it was like
there's a lot has to happen. I mean, a lot has to happen. But what needs to happen is exactly what we've seen every other weekend, which is just the craziest season.
Yeah.
But when I look at it, I see a team that I don't think people realize how far from their potential this Notre Dame football team is.
Agreed.
And that's why I still say like
wait a minute, I'm sorry. I don't agree with that, Brian. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, I know, right? So arbitrarily disagree with me and explain why, Sean. we can be skipping Shannon to just yell obnoxious, nonsensical points at each other for half an hour.
But no, they are. They are. The potential for this team is they haven't come close to it, like you said. Yeah. They haven't come close to it, and we don't know what it is, right? Is that potential? Well, at this point, I think you agree that potential would be with Jack Cohn as the starter.
Yeah, I mean, assuming they build it around him. Yeah.
Right, because Tyler's just not ready.
No.
Nor will he be ready anytime this season to be the full-time starter.
Right.
So Jack Cohn's going to have to be better. The offensive line getting better should improve his efficiency at the quarterback position, and it should improve the running game, starting against USC. North Carolina struggles against the run as well, as you saw against Miami. So, and Miami's offensive line has had some dreadful games early in the season. Got De'Aaron King killed early in the season. He's injured.
But then De'Aaron opted to have season-ending surgery.
Oh, yeah. Because he's looking to the next level in his opportunity.
I was referring to the comment that Manny Diaz made where he's like, De'Aaron opted to have surgery. And De'Aaron responded like, opted? Right. Like, really? And that's going to go over real well in your locker room.
Right.
Rob Thidoff says, Brian and Sean, I really just want Notre Dame to get on a roll now and forget about the chances for a playoff and just to win a bowl. However, I'm sensing 2007 when Thanksgiving weekend was filled with chaos. The next 2 weekends were filled with chaos.
Yeah.
If you remember, you had number 6. So talking about Thanksgiving, on Thanksgiving that year, Arizona State, number 6, got beat by USC at home. Number 1 LSU, if you remember this one, Sean, lost in multiple overtimes. I think it was like 4 overtimes to Arkansas. that year. Trying to go through number 4 Missouri beat number 2 Kansas that weekend. That was that weekend, and then the next weekend was even. I'm trying to find a couple more. Yeah, the next weekend was also crazy. So we had all those upsets late in the year. Then the next weekend, number 9 Oklahoma, because remember Missouri beat Kansas, jumped up to number 1. The following weekend, then Oklahoma went on the road, beat number 1 Missouri. Then that same weekend, Pitt, who had a losing record, beat number 2 West Virginia. That next weekend, and it was a wild couple of weeks because those were Big 12, those were conference championship games. If you remember, there was a lot of shakeup at the end of that season. And what was it? I think it was it a couple weeks before that? I'm trying to remember what was the year that UCLA beat USC when it seemed like USC was like locked and loaded and ready to win the title that year. Do you remember what year that was? Was it 07 or was it? I'm trying to remember what year that. It wasn't 07. Was it 06?
I think might have been 06.
You remember the year I'm talking about, right? Like it just USC just got to beat a mediocre, just had to beat a mediocre UCLA team, and they're playing for the championship, and they got beat. I think it was 06. I'm looking the scores up now.
This year is very reminiscent of for Notre Dame. I want to say was that 2015. Was that the year they went out to Stanford with an outside chance of getting into the playoff?
Yeah. And then lost in the final seconds.
Lost in the final seconds to Stanford.
Yeah, it was 06, by the way.
Hey, okay. Josh Adams had a game. That was his freshman year.
Yeah, he ripped off that 62-yard run on a counter play. Yeah. C.J. Sanders had a kick return for score. Kaiser hit Fuller on a bomb that game. Yeah. It's another game Notre Dame pissed away. Pardon my language. But remember Kaiser had that fumble late in the first half when he had just ripped off a long run.
Yep.
That's frustrating. Sean Rogers, 37-17 Notre Dame. Foskey, 3 sacks, game ball, Cone, 3 TDs. I think that would make a lot of people happy.
What would you put your money on? The 3 sacks for Foskey or the 3 touchdowns for Cone?
I put more money on Cone, 3 TDs. Number one, we've already seen him do it.
Really?
I think USC gets the ball out too quickly for Foskey to get 3 sacks. I think Foskey could have the best pass rushing game of his career and not get more than 1 or 2 sacks. Just because of how quickly they get the ball. And I think what would happen is now if you want to say, okay, Foskey has at least 3 disruptive plays, meaning sacks or forced interceptions, then I could see that. But just because if you look at USC's numbers, they don't give up a lot of sacks.
Right.
But they give up a lot of pressures. Because Keaton gets rid of the ball and he forces a lot of balls. And I think also just the nature of that offense, they also get a lot. I mean, they throw 45 passes in this game. At least 30 of them, 25 to 30 of them will be 5 yards, like 8 yards or shorter.
Yeah.
I mean, they get it out quick.
I think Slovis has been pressured. I saw the stat, 19 of his last 53 dropbacks. He's been pressured.
And when you consider how many of those throws were catch and throws, it's a lot of
quick pressure. Yeah.
Shane Wasson, this is a good question, Sean. I'll allow you to answer this. On your previous question about naming 5 head coaches taking Notre Dame, why is Mike Elson never mentioned? It's a good question.
That is a good question. Well, you know your people, right? He's been around. Notre Dame knows him very well. And who's to say he wouldn't get an interview quietly?
Yeah.
Who's to say he wouldn't? Would he be at the top of the wish list? More than likely, probably not. But he's definitely proven that he's a top-notch assistant coach.
And there's not a person on staff that sells Notre Dame better than Mike Elson.
Better than Mike Elson, exactly. So quietly, very quietly, not very quietly. I don't want to make it sound like they would be ashamed of it, but
no. I think I know where you're going, Sean. Yeah. So don't back from that because it's about more of like, let's do it quietly.
Yeah.
Not because you're ashamed of it, just because you want to feel it out. And then if that goes well, you say, hey, you know what? Let's make this thing formal. And then you bring him in for a more formal.
There you go.
It's not how I think it would go. It's not about being ashamed. It's just about, because here's the thing is if you interview him for the head coaching job formally, there's no chance the next coach can keep him. You can't.
No. You can't.
It's impossible to keep a coach on staff that this never, like, almost never goes well.
And that's a big loss.
Yes.
That's a big loss.
Yes. So I think that more than anything is why you say, hey, listen, let's talk. Let's not let this. I'll give you a perfect example. So Greg Hudson was named the D coordinator in 2016. One of the few smart decisions Brian Kelly made all season was naming Greg Hudson the DC. Talk to anyone that was in that program, and they'll tell you the D coordinator was actually Mike Elston. But you can't make Mike Elston the D coordinator when you know you're going to have to overhaul the entire staff in the offseason.
Right.
Because at that point in time, the season was over.
All
you
right.
name him D coordinator, and then they're not going to let – here's the thing. When you go 4-8, and at the time they're like 1-3, you can't say, well, we're just going to promote from within. So if you name him D coordinator, official title, you then have to either demote him to D line coach again, or B, you name someone else's D coordinator, and then that way it just looks like you're keeping your D line coach, but you go outside the program and get a new D coordinator. Optics matter in those circumstances.
Very much so.
And it was a very savvy move by Brian Kelly to make that happen, because I don't know if they would. It's kind of like he wanted to keep Mike Denbrock, but you had just promoted him to coordinator.
Right.
You think Mike Denbrock's going to stay and just be the receivers coach or tight ends coach?
Right.
Do you think the new O coordinator is going to want to have Mike Denbrock on staff? Although I know for a fact Chip Long and Mike Denbrock got along very well. I mean, Chip Long bought Mike's house from him when he took over. So there was a good connection there. But you can't keep that guy on staff who had your job the 2 previous years.
No.
And it's not even about your relationship with him, because Mike Denbrock is first class. If he would have stayed, and Mike made the decision to leave. Coach Denbrock made the decision to leave. But if he'd have stayed, he would have been first class. He'd have had Chip Long's back, all that. But it creates a power structure that's very concerning, because there's going to be players that have been around that are going to still automatically look to Coach Denbrock because he is a good coach and because he's so well respected. That creates uncertainty of who's my leader. That's exactly what hurt the program the year before when he promoted Mike Sanford to kind of the co-OC job. There was, Denbrock was trying to do his thing, which was good stuff. Sanford was trying to do his thing, which was not good stuff. And some players are like, who am I supposed to listen to here?
Right.
That's one of the many reasons that team collapsed that year. So I think that would be the reason why I would advocate, if you're going to talk to Mike Elston the first time, make sure it's quiet and informal.
Yeah.
That way, if you're just like, he's not our guy, you at least still have a chance to keep him on staff with the new coach. Because there's a few guys because you don't want to just completely overhaul the program, because the program's in a good place. The program doesn't need overhauled. It needs improved.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm not on the fire Brian Kelly bandwagon. No, Coach Kelly, you've done great things. Stop getting in your own freaking way. Make these final couple moves that are going to get you over the hump. Right. But if you hire a new coach from the outside, you don't want to lose everybody. There's definitely some coaches you're going to want to keep. And Mike Elston is at the top of my list, of those guys for a lot of reasons. Mike Mickens is on that list for me. And if you're a smart new head coach, you're going to say, hey, Marcus Freeman, what number? Here's a check. Right? I know it's only for a couple more seasons. Here's a check. Put whatever number on there you're comfortable with staying here, and you can guarantee me 2 more years. Again, we're working with the assumption that Coach Kelly leaves and you decide you don't want Marcus Freeman to get his first head coaching job at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Right. I'm working with that premise.
Right.
So if you're a smart head coach, you do that. Here's a check from the University of Notre Dame with a blank check. We signed it. Just write down the number you're comfortable with. Here you go. Here's a pen. Right. I would want to keep this defensive staff intact as much as possible.
Absolutely.
The offensive staff would require a lot of an overhaul. Paul Rose says, Brian, I thought I saw somewhere that A.J. Harris had renewed interest in Notre Dame. Have you heard anything? I haven't heard anything about renewed interest. He's always been interested in Notre Dame. I just think there's other programs he likes more. He's visited Notre Dame summer. Family grew up Notre Dame fans, but as of recently, I still believe he's still looking at the Clemsons, the Ohio States, and the Alabamas more than he is Notre Dame. Hopefully that changes, because he is he's special. I've said this, Sean. Yeah. He's the best corner in the country, regardless of class, in my opinion.
Man. I totally agree.
And he's smart. His family he'd fit in so well here. You just have to convince him that he fits in well here.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people around him, not family. He lives in Alabama, okay? Ooh. Not family, because his dad's I said this is coming from AJ. Dad's a Notre Dame fan. It's just the other people around him that say it's Clemson, it's Ohio State, and that's why it's so important that Notre Dame can turn. If Notre Dame can turn Kyle Hamilton and Cam Hart into high draft picks, that's going to help them a ton.
That's going to help them a ton. Yeah.
All right, Brandon Plenzer with a super chat. Thank you for that, Brandon. Brian, do we see Notre Dame's poor blitzing efforts corrected in the second half of the season? You think too many times seeing guys get jammed and not getting through? I don't know if I'd say they're poor blitzers. I think sometimes those guys, you're meant to, hey, you rock that guard because it's going to open up the tight end or the defensive end on the loop.
Yeah.
But hey, you take on that fullback because we got a safety coming up right behind you and we need you to take that guy out. So not every blitzer is designed to get through. That only happens when the other team sucks. Sometimes guys are meant to be, hey, we want to try to get two guys on you and you run through. I think the timing has not always been great, so I will give you that. Do I see it corrected in the second half? I hope so. I don't know what's going to happen in the second half. I really don't, but I think it's certainly possible. I think at times they're not always blitzing the right people. I'll say that. But I hope so. I mean, that's always kind of what you want to do is kind of improve those things and get better at those things. So we'll find out, Brandon. We definitely find out, and I will. I was also curious if you're going to be at the tailgate because Brandon is one of the few people that actually showed up at the last tailgate. So we had some really good conversation. Actually helped me break down the whole thing. One was like kind of settled down. I was like, oh, it's breakdown time. I look around like, okay, it's like 10 people here 2 seconds ago.
Right.
Now it's just 2 people helping me. Yeah. So Brandon was one of those people. So I appreciate you, buddy. All righty. All right, I love this. Okay, so Maddie K, 55. I'm officially making a petition to make Brian Driscoll the new head coach of the University of Notre Dame. Drew St. Blaise has already demoted me to OC.
Oh, man.
I got demoted in a matter of 12 seconds. Hey, Sean, all right.
Honestly, let's talk about that. Like,
oh, goodness gracious.
I might want to be the OC rather than the head coach.
Yeah. Why is that? Less pressure?
No, it has nothing to do with pressure. I'm just thinking about myself. I'm a family guy. Going out, doing a lot of shaking hands, kissing babies, speaking, all of that. Nah, you can have that.
I want to be in the lab, man.
Yeah, me too.
I want to be in the lab, breaking down film. Yes.
That's it.
Yep.
Then I can go home to my family and whatever time I have left over, give it to them. And yeah, that's it. That head coach thing that's a tough gig right now across college football.
Yep. We got Coleman Smith says joining late. Love to see Sean on the show. Lucky Lefty podcast. Go check it out if you haven't. And just for those people who don't know what he was referring to, that is a podcast that Sean does with Malik Zaire. Drew says that Malik is one of the most entertaining humans I know. Watching play ball or just listening, dude is truly hilarious. Sean and Malik recently started a podcast that talks about Notre Dame football. And you guys will dabble, if I remember correctly, when you and I talked when you were launching, you guys will dive into some other topics like culture and
pop
music
culture,
and things, but
NFL music, stuff like that. We had a pretty funny conversation about Drake last week, but we kind of connected it to college football.
You and I are going to have a conversation about that afterwards because I'm very curious. Knowing Malik being young and you being old, I kind of feel like I have an idea of where that went, and then you and I are going to be kind of like on the same page there.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you put this team back in that era, they get smashed, and that's kind of how I feel like modern day rappers.
And we kind of related it to college football and how quickly we label teams good teams. Like just say Iowa for this, like Iowa's number 2, and everybody was talking about how good they were. And for me, I took the perspective of the Penn State game, and I thought they got exposed, even though they won. I thought they were exposed in that game. And with Drake, for me, I'm like, man, we're so quick to say his albums are classics or it's a good album. Right. And then you take it, listen to it 2-3 years later, and it's like, oh, you don't like it the same? It doesn't have the same pop. And so we just looked at it from that standpoint. And so, don't be so quick to call everything good or classic or put a label on it.
And another example too, Sean, for that, if you want to kind of tie culture into sports, is I feel like after Jay-Z's second album, they did the same thing then. They just, if you released an album, it was automatically labeled good, when in reality, it wasn't.
Yeah.
I think so. So we see that with teams too, right? Like just because, and to me, the perfect example of that coming into the season was Wisconsin.
Agreed.
Everybody kept talking about, oh, Wisconsin's going to be good. And I'm like, based on what? Like, they've been bad. Like, they've been mediocre 2 of their last 3 years. But because they had some good seasons in 15 or whatever else, people just assume, oh, no. They're going to be a favorite over Notre Dame.
Like, based on what?
Right. Yeah. So I agree. And it wasn't based on recent history. It was just based on the past and a perception of Wisconsin that really hasn't existed in several years. I mean, the only season in the last 3 years prior to this season, the only season that Wisconsin lost fewer than 4 games was a season in which only played 7.
Yeah.
Went 4-3.
Yeah.
Well, they're probably going to have a worse record than that again this year. So 4 years in a row where they're going to have 3 or more losses, yet somebody thought it was smart to put them as a touchdown favorite over Notre Dame.
Over Notre Dame. That was an easy bet. And the inverse of that, you mentioned Jay-Z. There are actually Jay-Z albums that weren't really thought of as being good, that people have changed their opinion on as time has gone on.
His first album was still his best, in my opinion. Reasonable Doubt to me is still
that's
the
pretty much.
JBL.
I mean, that is what most people hold on to when it comes to Jay-Z.
Yeah,
and he got to a certain point to whereas he built, which is what you do as a brand.
Mm-hmm.
You build up your brand, and then you can put out whatever you want to put out. Doesn't make a difference because
he started making music for a different audience.
Yes, and the brand sells, so you're going to put up numbers no matter what. That's the same thing for Drake. It doesn't matter what he puts out now; he's going to sell. So,
and apparently, it doesn't matter what Wisconsin does. There's still going to be, like, who was it that asked me? Buddy of mine texted me today, and he was asking me. Let me find the text that he sent me this morning. Let me see here. He says, why is Iowa State favored by a full touchdown over Oklahoma State? And my answer was because of the people are still living off of the preseason expectations that were never really warranted in the first place. North Carolina is another one.
For that, I think they view Oklahoma correcting or righting the ship in the last 2 games or the last game and a half with Caleb Williams. I think that's the feeling. And even though Oklahoma State's a really good defensive team, they really struggle to score.
Yeah, but that shouldn't matter against Iowa State, though. That's my thing.
No, that's true.
Iowa State should not be a touchdown favorite over Oklahoma State, who's undefeated.
No.
And they struggle to score, right, to your point. But
Iowa State hasn't really scored.
Right. The way we thought. I'm a lot more concerned about Texas's offense than I was about Iowa State's. Now, of course, Iowa State's going to go win by 20 just because I said this, right? But I don't get that one, Sean. I don't. But it just sometimes these perceptions exist and persist that you just.
And I think people look at that Texas win for Oklahoma State as being kind of like a lucky win.
Yeah, but they've been saying that every week, right? That's the thing.
Texas, that's true, because Texas really did outplay them for about 2.5 quarters.
Right.
But that's why you have to play the full game, the full 60.
That's right.
You have to play the full 60.
That's right. All right. Caleb Collins asks, how does BK, an offensive guru before he came to Notre Dame, struggle this bad on offense? You want to go with that one?
How does he struggle on offense? Well, it's definitely not talent. It's not talent. This is I'll just leave with this, and this is the best way I can put it. He's so scared of his team making mistakes that he tries to coach not to make mistakes, which limits the talent he has.
You can't be aggressive that way.
Yeah. If you have that much talent, putting them in position to be at their best means taking risk.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's willing to do that.
I'm going to give you 2 examples. Last year, if you go watch the Duke game, I thought early in the game, Notre Dame came out, Ian Book was thrown over the middle. They were taking shots.
Yeah.
And then they had that drive where he threw that pick.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think the offense was ever the same after that.
Ian Book wasn't the same after that. Yeah.
When you had the fumble I mean, first game against Florida State, if we'd see that team repeat itself, Notre Dame's 6-0 right now and blowing people out, taking shots down the field, spreading the ball out, getting it out quickly. Well, then they did that against Toledo and got hit in the back, fumbled the ball. Then you struggle the rest of the half. You throw a pick six.
Yeah.
And I feel like the offense has never been the same. And the only other times we've ever really seen the offense be that way is in a 2-minute situation where you have no choice.
Yeah.
We saw the same thing last year where, and I don't think that's a Tommy Rees thing.
No.
Unless Tommy Rees, Chip Long, Mike Denbrock all have the same personality.
And they don't.
They don't.
By the way.
Yeah. None of them are even close. All good dudes. Chip got along with Mike. Chip got along with Tommy. Tommy got along with Chip. I know Tommy likes Mike because of the time. I mean, so we're not saying that they're like they don't personalities are different. It's like some bad thing. They're very different coaches.
Right.
Mike Elko and Clark Lee were both great coordinators. They're very different personalities. So that's what we mean by that. But yeah, I think you're spot on. I think it's the fear of making a mistake.
Yeah.
And it's got to the point where it's created basically they just basically freeze.
It makes us a swaggerless program.
Yeah. On offense.
Yes.
On offense. Yeah. Searcher Green 9. That to me, LSU he's definitely still on the Mel Tucker thing. And I mean, let me read it. To me, LSU will want a national championship caliber coach. I don't think Tucker's that guy. I think he's a perfect Michigan State coach. If you think he is a better coach than I do, it's just a difference of opinion. But that's what makes this fun, Searcher. I mean, that's what makes this fun to discuss. We're talking sports, right? We're not talking, Fed policy or, border policy or taxation policy or anything else like that. We're talking football, right? And that's part of the fun. And that's part of the unknowns anytime you hire a coach. I don't think anyone, despite the fact
I'll just jump in here, right? And then I'll let you go because this it seems like he's trying to poke and poke and poke. Look, let's be realistic. No one thought Ed Orgeron was going to be a national championship caliber coach, but he won a national championship. He went to Tuscaloosa and he beat Nick Saban in his own backyard. You know why? He got this kid that transferred from Ohio State. Just happened to want to go to LSU. LSU has never had a top-notch quarterback like Joe Burrow.
They didn't have one in 2018 either.
No.
Even though they had Joe Burrow.
You would have never known. Think about the impact that Jamar Chase and all of the LSU wide receivers are having.
Jefferson,
Harris Marshall, right. All of that. You would have never seen any of that at the level you saw it if it wasn't for Joe Burrow showing up and and Joe Brady with Joe Burrow.
That's the second one because all those dudes were on the team in 2018.
All of that had to come together. So you can talk about national championship coach, caliber coach. It goes back. Nick Saban isn't Nick Saban without all of those great assistants.
Right.
And all of those great
that's what makes a great head coach.
So let's not just throw all of the flowers at the feet of all these coaches that have won national championships. Guess what? Dabo had his team in the national championship game. I mean, the national semifinals. His offensive coordinator couldn't be there. And guess what his offense looked like? Tony Elliott, because of COVID, wasn't able to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, the offense didn't look the same.
It hasn't looked the same this year either.
And it hasn't looked the same this year. So, but wait a minute. Dabo is a national championship caliber coach, right?
But see, for me, Sean, we don't know. None of us really know what a guy's going to do. I mean, no one thought Dabo was going to be that when he got hired.
No.
Nobody thought that Gene Chizik was going to win a national title, and then all of a sudden Cam Newton shows up. I think for me, when I look at it, is winning a championship isn't what I look for. It's sustainability and being able to win a championship.
Yes.
If you win a championship and then go 3-9 2 years later, like Gene Chizik, if you win a championship in that year where everything goes correctly, like at Orgeron, and you did make, I mean, he deserves credit for those moves, but he made those moves, if we're being honest, because he was on the hot seat.
Absolutely.
And if he doesn't make those moves, he's going to get fired.
Absolutely.
To me, you have to. One of the things I look for, and this is my one concern with Jeff Brom. If I'm being honest with you, my biggest concern with Jeff Brom is I think he's made some bad hires. I don't think he's hired great O-line coaches, and I don't think until recently he's hired good coordinators. And to me, that is ultimately what's going to determine success or not. I mean, if you go look at Bob Stoops, look at the coaching staff he had. What was it? Was it 2000 they won, right?
Yeah.
2000 Oklahoma team. I mean, that team had
Florida
a
State, right?
great coaching staff. I mean, you had Mark Mangino was your offensive coordinator. Mike Leach had just left, but Mike Mangino was on the staff the year before. You had Mike Stoops and Brent Venables were your co-coordinators. There was a lot of other really good assistants on that team.
Yeah.
It's about putting a good staff together. And then he goes out and, they're kind of struggling a little bit, and he goes out and gets Lincoln Riley and turns things around. I mean, to me, that's what makes a good head coach. And that's one of my issues with James Franklin. I think there's two big issues I have with James Franklin. Number one, terrible game day coach.
Definitely.
I haven't seen any of those red flags with Mel Tucker or Jeff Brom or some of these other coaches that I like.
Yeah.
Number two, I think he's only really made a couple good hires, and he's kind of backed into some of those. He's made more bad hires than he's made good hires at Penn State, in my opinion. And that's one of my issues with James Franklin. But to me, it's about, can you motivate your players? Can you create a sense of discipline within your program? And can you hire good coaches consistently? And I don't know if Mel Tucker can do that. I have no idea. I have a lot more doubts about Mel Tucker than you do at LSU. But I'd have even more questions about LSU if I was Mel Tucker.
No, I don't.
And that's my thing.
I don't want him to go.
Yeah. He's got a lot more to prove for me.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, because my big red flag for him, it's not the lack of head coaching experience. It's he's never been anywhere very long. And that always makes me nervous. How long is he really going to be here? And how good of a job is he going to do in years 4 and 5 and 6? Because it's easy to kind of come in with that message for a couple of years and guys buying, and then you're gone. Right. And then you're starting that over again. It's a lot harder to create a long-term sustainability than it is to win. Like let's just say Urban Meyer, I'm just trying to make a point. Let's say Urban Meyer came back and he coached at a Notre Dame or a Texas or something like that, USC, and he wins a couple titles, and all of a sudden he gets the numbers closer to what Saban has.
Right.
It still doesn't make him in the same league as Nick Saban.
No.
Because Nick Saban's ability to sustain it over a period of time, whereas Urban would come in, get hot in a short period of time, and then flame out and then leave. And then leave the program in a mess. Did it at Florida.
Yeah.
Left Florida in a mess.
Yes.
Left Ohio State in a bit of a mess.
Just blessed enough that Ryan Day was on the staff.
Yes.
Yeah.
And from talking to people, and I know you have too, Ryan Day is the polar opposite of Urban Meyer when it comes to his expectations for how people conduct themselves in the program.
Absolutely.
And it was needed. And so to me, that's why, Nick Saban has been able to reinvent himself a couple different times at Alabama, which is what's needed. That's ultimately the key to being a great coach, is that ability to create sustainability. And that's my issue with Mel Tucker is it's not the head coaching record. Because Marcus Freeman would be on my resume or my interview list. It's because the problem is guys like that, you don't know if they're successful because they're able to take what they're inherited and make it good. But to be a great head coach, you have to do that, and then you have to then go build your own players. A perfect example, Charlie Weiss.
Yeah.
When Charlie Weiss inherited guys that, Ty was a terrible coach. He was awful. But his staff he had some pretty decent, good, solid college football coaches, guys that could teach guys proper fundamentals. They weren't real inventive from a scheme standpoint, although I always liked Kent Bear as a defensive coordinator. He just didn't have any weapons to work with. I thought he was a good D coordinator, solid D coordinator, but he taught fundamentals. Those kids worked hard. Those kids played hard. They knew how to line up and do all that. And when Charlie inherited that with all the schemes, they were great the first 2 years. Well, then after that, when it came down to, okay, now Charlie, it's your turn to build the program.
And you have to recruit and all of that.
And you have to develop, and he could recruit, but he couldn't develop because he didn't understand the importance of the fundamentals, and he was terrible at hiring assistant coaches.
Yeah.
Awful at hiring assistant coaches. Those things are all more important than, what you've done in the past. And I just don't know if Mel Tucker's been anywhere long enough to prove to me that he can do that.
And that's a very important piece of this. Even though he came from the Belichick tree, Belichick has an eye not only for talent, he has an ability to develop those that others will overlook. and see where they can fit into what he wants to do, especially from a defensive side of the ball. And then he knows how to hire the right coaches. Like, he's already thinking, if this guy goes, I already know who I want to be my special teams coach. And then I move this person to this position. He's a great leader of an organization. Right? And this is the thing, because this applies in all sports. I've seen some bad coaches win titles. I've seen very good coaches never win a title. That doesn't change whether or not this guy is a bad coach or a good coach.
Yeah.
You have to know what goes into coaching.
Right.
Like, it is possible to win because everything just aligns.
Right. At Orgeron in 2019.
At Orgeron. Perfect example.
Gene Chizik in 2010.
Exactly. So that's fine. And if you think any coach, that can happen for any coach. So, yeah, Mel Tucker can win a national championship if he's in a position where everything aligns.
Jimbo Fisher, 2013. What has Jimbo Fisher done outside of that 2-year stretch?
Really? No, nothing.
Really?
Nothing. So, national championship isn't like the end-all be-all. Sustainability, what you talked about. And that's the next step for Mel Tucker to prove that he can have sustainability. And he doesn't have to do it at LSU. He can prove that at Michigan State.
Agree. And then find a better job. I don't think LSU is a great job.
Absolutely.
I think he needs to stay at LSU too, because he still has a lot to learn as a coach. And LSU isn't the place you want to do that.
No.
Because they will not have patience for you. I think national championships are very important, and at certain places.
Yeah.
At Notre Dame, I'm sorry, your resume is incomplete if you don't have a national championship. At other places, it's not. I think ultimately there's two ways to define greatness. One is you won championships, but if championships come without sustainability, then they're just flashes in the pan.
Yeah.
At Orgeron, Jimbo Fisher, Gene Chizik, right? Then there's coaches like Bo Schembechler, who never won a title, that I don't think how you can argue that he wasn't a great coach, because he was good for 20 plus. I mean, they were the same program for 20 plus years.
Absolutely.
And I think there's a level to that as well, that you have to show you got to be able to do one of those two things. To me, Nick Saban is more of the Bo Schembechler. He's shown that he can win over a period of time if he so chooses to stay at a place.
Yeah.
And whereas other guy, Urban Meyer, is a guy that he's got a 5-year window to win as much as he can, and then after that, it's like,
who's a better head coach, Lloyd Carr or Bo Schembechler?
Oh boy, yeah, Bo. I mean, yeah,
Lloyd has a title,
right? Exactly, half a title.
Yeah,
I have to. I just had to. I had to. But no, I mean, Lloyd had a bunch of what was his nickname before the title year? Like 4 Lost Lloyd or something like that. Wasn't he had some nickname, because they'd lose 4 games every year.
Yep.
But he had that 1 year, like you said, where everything went right.
1 year.
Right. And I also think part of that too is like Mark D'Antonio. Mark D'Antonio is not doing at Michigan State now what he did when he came, because he came at the perfect time. Michigan was down. They had terrible head coaches. Ohio State was a little down. Wisconsin was going through some stuff where they were good a couple of years, but then not so. The Penn State was going through their crazy stuff.
Exactly.
He came in at the right time.
Everything aligned. Yep.
Yeah. It was like Ohio State was really it. And then, then he was able to win the Big Ten in the year where Ohio State was kind of at the beginning of the Urban Meyer era and those type of things. And he was able to get players that he wouldn't have got now because they weren't going to go to Michigan.
Right.
And at the time, Notre Dame wasn't a very good program at the time either.
Yeah.
So it's just timing is very important with this whole thing as well. Drew St. Blaise says, I think the SEC has kind of shown that they are kind of self-destructing. Thinking if you can win an NC every year has lost the SEC a lot of good coaches. I agree completely.
Yeah.
Agree. The lack of patience for a down year, like with David Cutcliffe, did a great job at Ole Miss, has a down year. They tell him you need to fire your staff. He says no, they let go of him. That was stupid. That sent them on a decade of irrelevance. But I agree with that. But sometimes, though, a coach was failing. Ed Orgeron was going to get fired Had he not hired Joe Brady, he's gone by now.
Yeah.
So to me, that's a
And
little
Joe
bit
Brady
different.
was a recommendation to an alum.
Yeah.
In connection with the Saints. It wasn't like, Ed said, "Oh man, I'll
Joe
go get
Brady
Joe
guy. I
Brady."
got to get him. Yeah.
No, it was a recommendation that was strongly recommended to Ed Orgeron. Like, hey, I think you might want to look at this guy.
Yeah.
The contract's right here. We're telling you, look at him, but here's his contract. So, and he won a national championship.
Right. Not a great coach.
No, not at all. So I wouldn't put Mel Tucker in that category.
Because we don't know. Because we don't know. I don't think there's a lot of great candidates. This is not a year I'd want to be looking for head coach.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. It's not a year I'd want to be looking for head coach.
And that's what we're saying. Like, don't be so quick to put labels on things and people. Like, let things play out.
Ethan Bodner asks, random question I've always wondered and wanted your opinion. If Kaiser had stayed for the 2017 season, what do you think our record would have been? I feel he would have balanced the great rush attack. I have some strong opinions on this.
I'll let you go. I'll say this, and then I'll set you up. Okay. Can I Trae Young you right here? Can I throw
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay. The temperature in the locker room would not have been the same. He was the type of person, you have the type of person that loves to constantly change the thermostat in your house. Like 1 minute you're like, it feels good. And it's like, wait a minute, who turned on the heat? Like, yeah, that's how he would have been.
Yeah.
Like, you had a great locker room, really good locker room. DeShone Kizer would have been the one making it cold when it didn't need to be and making it hot when it didn't need to be. And there you go. There's the ooh.
The only way, I'm going to say this. I think if DeShone Kizer would have come back for 2017, that would have been an unbelievable Notre Dame football team. And I'm going to say this. This is why. The only way he would have come back in 2017 is if he had a come to Jesus moment about himself.
About himself. Yeah.
Because people focus on, and this is the same arguments I had in 2016 with people when I said Malik should start. Because yes, DeShone's a much better passer than Malik. He's a really good runner. He's a first-round NFL draft talent. But none of that matters if you are not a leader and you aren't respected in your own locker room.
Yep.
And in some instances, you're somewhat despised in your own locker room. That was where DeShone was in 2016. Jeff George is a great example. And Jeff George is one of the 5 to 8 most talented quarterbacks ever playing in the NFL. Never won. Was not liked. You can't have a quarterback that people don't respect. You can't have a quarterback whose actions are counter to everything you're trying to do as a football program.
Yep.
Had DeShone come back in 2017, knowing the offensive coordinator they had that year the way that I do, he wouldn't have started if he was that way. He wouldn't have. If he would have come back, he would have had to have a personality change. The fact that DeShone still has not recognized, as far as I know, his need for change makes me think that would not have happened. But had DeShone come back because of the personality, not the personality change, but the recognition of like, hey, I can't be this way. Just because I'm 6'4" and athletic and with a big arm doesn't mean I can. I just want 4 and 8, right? Like my ego should be burst right now. My ego bubble should be burst right now. Unfortunately, that was not DeShone. But yeah. So if he would have come back and been a different guy, that would have been great. But I think that to your point, DeShone, who he was, would not have been successful as Brandon, who he was.
Yes.
Because Brandon was respected. He played his butt off. He practiced hard, and his teammates loved him. And that
nowhere near as talented.
No.
Nowhere near as talented.
No. Neither was Malik,
if
we're being honest.
Yeah.
Malik may not agree with that, but I mean, to me, DeShone is arguably the most talented quarterback Notre Dame had under Brian Kelly. Just physical talent, not all the other things, ball placement and and understanding and decision making and leadership. I'm not talking about that stuff. That's important stuff. I'm just talking physical talent, combination of. And the second to me would probably be Everett.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of the guys that started, I'm referring to.
Right.
But those two guys both lacked the leadership qualities of other players. I mean, if you could put Ian Book's leadership in Deshaun Kaiser's body, Notre Dame wins 2 national championships,
Probably
15
so.
and 17.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So
I agree with that.
That's where I'm at. Okay. Chad Williams says, I think USC is going to run the ball more than most people think. I agree with you, Chad. I think they will have learned their lesson from the second half of the 19 game. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, and I wrote about it. I tend to agree with you there.
I disagree.
You think they're just going to come out throwing?
Graham Harrell just can't help himself.
Interesting. They've run it. I mean, he says down here too, but they've run it relatively for them. They've run it a decent amount the last couple games.
Graham Harrell just, and I'm talking about what's been coming from the U.S. side of things, and the guys that cover, and the guys and gals that cover USC football. They are frustrated with Graham Harrell. They're like, dude, you're doing a great job running the game, and this game is still a 1-possession game, and here you go. 19 straight passes, 15 straight passes. So it's just something about him when he's wired. He comes from Texas Tech. Yeah. He quarterbacked at Texas Tech, where he's just wired. When things get tight, every offensive coordinator has something that they go to.
The Mike Leach version of the air raid is very much a pass. I mean, there's pass heavy, and then there's the Mike Leach air raid, and that's where Graham Harrell comes from.
I guess
I'll bet you dinner that they're going to be more balanced in the first half than you think that they are. How about that? And we'll come to terms on what that looks like.
We're just talking ratio.
Yeah.
Not number of runs, but just ratio. Yeah. How many times they run first? Okay.
We'll discuss it. We'll discuss the terms afterwards. But
I'm good with that.
We'll go anywhere in town except Ruth's Chris, because I can't afford that, buddy. So Brandon Plensner says Cam Hart completely shuts down Drake London. Could do wonders for cornerback recruiting and be a great confidence booster for Hart, who continues to improve. I'll say this: if he holds Drake London in check, now that could mean giving up 9 catches, but it's 9 catches for 81 yards, right? Or 101 yards, where it's like he didn't make any kind of impact. That's his second big-time receiver. Cam Hart will have played a big role in shutting down this year.
Yep.
David Bell being the other. Heck yeah, that would go a long way towards his reputation in Notre Dame cornerback recruiting. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I guess I'd have to say we'd have to determine what shutdown means, because shutdown's not going to mean 3 catches. It's going to look a lot like the David Bell. I mean, if you say Cam Hart gave up 7 receptions, David Bell, that's a lot. Well, yeah, 64 yards. And half of that came on one play. That was a miraculous catch.
Right.
So, yeah. Corey D had a super chat that we missed. Thank you for putting us back, Corey. This is how people should do it. Brandon did it also, but we actually didn't miss his super chat. A week or two ago, the topic of Tim Priester reporting that Jeff Quinn and Dell Alexander could be gone after the season. Have you heard anything recently that validates that report? I have not heard anything beyond what Tim has heard. And there's a reason I don't talk about it a lot. I don't feel it's appropriate for me to talk about that if I don't have legitimate sourcing on it, because you're talking about Jeff Quinn has a wife.
Yeah.
His kids are gone. Dell's are not. He has youngish kids. They're kind of Vince's age. I'm going out there speculating on him being fired and all those kind of things is just not something I'm comfortable with. I'm perfectly comfortable saying that that there needs to be a change. I don't care whether that's firing a guy or that guy doing a better job. That's part of my job. But I'm honestly not chasing those rumors down right now, because we're 6 games into the season. Brian Kelly, I promise you, is not going around telling people that he's getting rid of Dell Alexander and Jeff Quinn. If that's coming, it's probably coming from a different office on campus. And they're not firing anybody in the middle of the season. The only reason they fired Brian Van Gorder in the middle of the season is because Brian Van Gorder was a toxic person. Dell Alexander and Jeff Quinn are not bad guys, just bad coaches right now.
Yeah.
And there's a reason Dell has lost that many players. That has created a bit of I wouldn't say it's toxic culture, but it's a bad environment. But it's not a let's fire a guy in the middle of the season type of thing. As we get closer to the end of the season, Corey, I will start and Sean will as well. We'll start reaching out to more sources. But 6 games in the season, what if Notre Dame goes out the next 6 games and throws for 350 yards a game, and the receivers look like world beaters, and they get a commitment from this player at receiver or whatever else? Okay, aren't you the guy that said they should fire him? Well, kind of. I'm just saying, like, I would still say, yeah, they need to make a change, but that doesn't mean that Brian Kelly's going to agree with me. Right? I mean, if Notre Dame comes out and runs for 200 yards a game the next 6 games, you think Brian Kelly's still going to, if let's just say he is thinking about doing it, you still think he's going to do that in the second half of the year? So let's let the season play out. Yeah, let's let the season play out first. Jason McNeil says, thank you guys for the great analysis. Can't get it anywhere else. Well, I appreciate that.
Thank you
very, very much. All right, let me get to some of these. D-Rock says, I think, response chat, I think SC will play Dart. I heard he's more of a mobile quarterback. I agree. I think you'll see more than usual run game for SC. I'm curious about how this is going to play out because SC keeps talking about how he's not cleared medically and all this other kind of stuff, but he's practicing.
Making a trip, right?
Part of me wonders if that's just mind games from Dante Williams.
Mm-hmm.
I think we will see Jackson Dart, and if he plays, they will run more, but USC threw a lot with Jackson Dart too.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, he ran, but I mean, he didn't run a lot. I mean, he had 32 rushing yards he only played 1 game. He had 6 carries for 32 yards. He threw the ball 46 times in that game. Still went over Washington State. So it's not like he ain't Tyler Buckner, like how they use Tyler Buckner, right? He is a thrower that will also run, whereas Tyler Buckner has been used as a runner who will occasionally throw. Now, obviously, he did that more in Virginia Tech, but that's kind of how I look at that.
If Tyler Buckner was at USC, he would be throwing the ball 46 times.
Mm-hmm.
Still the same offensive coordinator.
Yep.
Hey, Graham, he can't help himself. He just not help himself.
Yep. Here we go. RJG Irving has a comment kind of what we're talking about. I've done several turnarounds in the business world, special skill set. Those skills don't age well in go forward mode. Get it fixed, get it stable, move on. I think in coaching is more conducive to being able to do both, turn around and stay, but it's dependent on the coach's personality. And there's a lot of coaches that I would imagine is just like the business world where their temperament is come in and just be a wrecking ball. And I think Lou Holtz is kind of that way.
Yeah.
I mean, Lou Holtz was at Notre Dame for 10 years, 11 years. Last few years of that didn't go well.
No.
Right? Some coaches are just that way. Lou Holtz was never really anywhere for a long period of time. Urban Meyer's that way. I mean, he's just not a guy that's built to be somewhere for 12 years. Some guys are. Some guys are get it turned around and make it work. I don't know if Nick Saban would have done at Bama if what he did at Bama had he been hired at Bama instead of LSU.
Yeah.
At that stage in his career. I think it took the Michigan State, LSU, and Miami jobs to make Nick Saban say, hey, I need to rethink this. Yes, I'm going to turn it around, but I need to be thinking what's more sustainable. And I think that made him, in my opinion, a better coach.
And you have to look at what took place in that Miami Dolphins situation, recognizing he had won up to that point, focusing on defense and special teams, right? Without the big-time quarterback. He goes, he has an opportunity to get a big-time quarterback and passes, or however it happened. They were supposed to get Drew Brees. They didn't get Drew Brees. He ends up back at Alabama, but he goes back to Alabama with a new mindset of the importance of certain things that were more important, that weren't as important previously. Now he recognizes their importance. And he didn't exactly start winning. I mean, he had Greg McElroy, but as he went on, you start to see him get quarterbacks that were first-round quarterbacks instead of just.
It took him a while to get there, though.
It did.
I mean, because he had John Parker Wilson, he had Greg McElroy, he had AJ McCarron, who was a third-round pick.
Yeah.
Then he had Jacob Coker.
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts. Although you could argue that if
Jake Coker was a big time, Jake Coker just couldn't play because Jameis was on the roster.
Yeah, I always thought he was a little overhyped. just personally.
He might have been.
But because everybody fell in love with his big arm.
Yeah.
But he was a good player, won him a championship, but I don't think he got drafted. I mean, he's really only had two. I mean, he's only had 2 first-round picks, and they were both recently. It was Tua and
he has a third on his roster right now.
Oh, right now, yeah. But let's see how he develops. But yeah, I mean, he's got a shot. He's certainly got a shot to be. But my point is that it took him a decade to get a first-round quarterback.
It did.
A lot of his big-name quarterbacks didn't pan out.
No, and my point is, I think that experience opened him up to recognize what was coming along and what was changing. I think what really got him to open up, because maybe he wasn't able to recruit those guys because of what he was doing offensively.
Right.
But I think Cam Newton single-handedly changing Auburn and beating him kind of opened his eyes to where the game was going to go.
This is great, Sean. This is 2 disagreements, right? So you're not a yes man anymore. Okay, this is my second disagreement. I don't think Cam did that. I think Cam was such a unicorn that Saban was like, no one else is going to get a Cam Newton. I think it was Johnny Manziel right on the heels of Cam Newton, because Johnny happened 2 years after Cam.
Oh, so
Johnny Manziel's more repeatable than Cam Newton.
Okay.
Like, who's going to have another Cam Newton?
But it was pretty much the same.
The only team that's had a Cam Newton since then was Wyoming.
Yeah.
Right?
You're right.
So I think it was Cam. I think it wasn't until Cam was followed up by Johnny Manziel that Saban started to see, okay, and he started looking for more mobile quarterbacks. Not all of them panned out. He missed on some. Then he finally hit it with Jalen. But I don't think if Johnny Manziel doesn't come along, I don't think he recruits Jalen Hurts. I don't.
You know what? We can take it a step further, because this might go to how stubborn Nick Saban probably was.
Which I think coaches need to have a level of stubbornness.
Yeah. Because right after Johnny Manziel, Nick Marshall comes along.
Yeah, 2013.
And beats him the exact same way. So eventually, at some point, he realizes and recognizes, you know what? Everybody's attacking my defense and finding ways to beat my defense. I can't stand still offensively.
Yeah.
And just run the ball and try to keep the ball away from these offenses that don't care about time of possession.
Well,
they just want to.
And look what happened in 14 as well.
Yeah.
Bo Wallace and Ole Miss beat him. Now, Bo wasn't the runner that those other guys were, but he was a mobile quarterback.
Exactly.
And he made plays with his legs. I think it was, but I think it started with Johnny Manziel. I think if Johnny Manziel doesn't happen, I don't think he makes the changes he makes. Because again, if you're looking at Cam Newton and saying, gee, let's get the next Cam Newton, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
Because
they aren't out there.
They're not. That's like saying, I need to find the next Lamar Jackson, or I need to find the next Trevor Lawrence.
Right.
Those guys are unicorns.
Yeah.
You're not going to get them all the time. People talk about like Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson was a great player, but if you put in my opinion, you put Deshaun Watson on the 19 and 20 Clemson teams, they're not in the college football playoff. I don't think they would be.
I think Trevor is first of all, what Trevor did as a true freshman is just that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it took Deshaun, I would say, a year and a half to really be comfortable on the college level. So I would agree with that. But just to the bigger point of the comment right here by RJ, from a corporate standpoint, yes, I see what you're saying. But there are so many different ways to win
in
sports.
coaching. In coaching.
And coaching in sports.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at Jerry Jones, he splits ways with
Jimmy Johnson.
Jimmy Johnson, right? He goes against Barry Switzer. Barry Switzer wins. Barry Switzer wasn't the greatest coach.
No, Barry Switzer won because of what Jimmy did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's my point.
Right.
It's like he'll get credit in the record books.
Sure.
But we know
they won in spite of Barry Switzer.
Absolutely. And several situations, which goes back to our point, if you're just going to label it as a national championship caliber coach, I mean,
right.
A lot of guys have won national championships that I wouldn't deem great coaches.
I still need to see more from Coach Tucker. But I'd say the same thing about a lot of guys.
We both agree on that. Yeah. I don't want him to take the LSU job for that specific reason.
I'm afraid he's going to fail.
Yeah,
and then
absolutely
right. Because I don't even there's a lot of coaches. If I'm Dave Aranda's agent, I'm like,
yeah,
don't touch that job. If I'm Billy Napier's agent, is about the only guy that I would consider saying, hey man, you need to, he's got a unique ability to fit there because he's already in the state.
He's already in the state. Yep.
So anyway, Lucas Chapman said, I sent 2 super chats and it was about Kelly's statement about self-scouting over the bye week. Will that actually translate this last half stretch? I don't have much faith it will. I understand your skepticism. I do. I think Sean's more optimistic about the changes happening than I am. I just need to see it.
We actually kind of spoofed it.
So you think the changes are going to happen on defense, but not on offense?
I just think he was being hyperbolic to make it seem like
saying really what he has to say.
Work. Like,
right.
You went over situational football.
Mm-hmm.
It was simple. 6 games in, teams, offensive coordinators had more tape on Marcus Freeman and his defense.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're able to scheme and come up with plays to directly attack Notre Dame's defense situationally in this part of the field, because now they see trends. When we're in this part of the field, they like to do this, so therefore we'll attack them this way. And I thought Justin Fuente and the staff at Virginia Tech did a really good job of that. But on top of that, what accentuated the success that Virginia Tech was able to have was the fact that Notre Dame was tired. Just the amount of times that they gave up the edge on running plays and letting the quarterback Burmeister get out the backside, scrambling. That wasn't what we saw from this defense. So, I mean, but you do that anyway. You should do that each and every week. You should be able to teach situational football based upon the opponent. There's nothing special. Look, we look at our tape. We self-scout ourselves every week. We see these mistakes. We can't make that mistake again. If we get in this situation, we know what to look for, and we're going to do this and do that. And as long as we stick to our fundamentals and our responsibilities, we should be fine. That's just coaching. That's just coaching. And he used the word nuance like 5 times.
That tells me he's just talking. That's why I'm not overly optimistic, because he's saying what he thinks we want to hear.
Exactly.
I need to now. If I see it on Saturday, that's great. But I mean, when he started talking about Michael Carmody to tight end, I was like, okay, nothing's changed.
It's ridiculous. And then his explanation of, the impact of using Tyler Buckner in the middle of the game and how it tires out the defensive line, so Jack Cohn looks better in the fourth quarter. Like, what are you talking about right now? What are we talking about? That at that point, that's when I kind of tuned out and said, I can't believe he's even saying this.
Yeah. Sean Davis wanted me to tell you that you have a great name.
Hey, what's up, Sean Davis?
Sean, thank you for the super chat. I appreciate that very much. Interesting conversation going on here in the side here, Sean. Yeah. Michael O'Brien talking about Jackson Darty said he's mobile, although if he plays some Saturday night, I think his mobility will be a little less. He put up big numbers, but let's get real. Washington State is a way below average football team, or way below average team this year. Bad team. I wouldn't say that Washington State is a bad team overall. I don't think they were a very good team when they played USC. I mean, they have won 3 games in a row, including beating Oregon State, who's a good football team this year. And they just beat Stanford this past weekend, who's okay, and beat Cal on the road. So I think they're playing well. I don't think they were a very good team. And then, of course, we get down here. People saying Tad Williams says totally agree. He is a true Frost that threw for nearly 400 yards and 4 TDs. And then Michael counters with against a lower level Power 5 team. And Chad Williams says, okay, again, a true Frost. You think Tyler Buckner's throwing for 400 yards and 4 TDs against Washington State? Maybe in a game where he threw 46 passes. Sure, he could probably do that.
Yep.
It's the nature of the offense. I mean, again, you have to look at that offense differently. Throwing for 400 yards in this Notre Dame offense is a phenomenal accomplishment. That's rarely done. That offense, it's not that because you're going to throw a ton of passes.
And you're talking about development, right?
Yeah.
And historically, that staff, their quarterbacks come in ready to throw the pill.
Right.
They just do.
Right.
I remember when Slovis first took over. He came in throwing for like 350.
Yeah, and he's not good.
Yeah.
I've been trying to tell people for years, Keaton Slovis is a very overrated quarterback. He is a product of his system. Graham Harrell, his coach, threw for over 5,000 yards twice in his career and went undrafted.
Right.
Washington State a couple years ago had a kid, Anthony Gordon. Remember him? What was his numbers in 19? 5,579 yards, 48 touchdowns, 16 interceptions. The kid, I'm going to look it up here. The kid threw for over 400 yards 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. Threw for 606 yards against Washington State, 520 against Stanford, 466 against Arizona State, 570 against UCLA. Why? Because he threw 687 passes. In that offense, could Tyler Buchner throw for 400 yards against a team like Washington State, who gave up over 300 passing yards the week before against, wait for it, Portland State? Yeah, I think he could probably throw for 400 yards if he threw almost 50 passes. And a ton of them were 2 yards past the line of scrimmage. Yeah, I think he could. Would he, I mean, just I don't care what he did against Washington State. It was one game, and here's the other thing. They had no film on him. I mean, let's not forget what Tyler Buchner did the first time he stepped foot on the football field. Notre Dame went down and scored like a 96-yard touchdown drive.
Yeah.
I mean, look what he did in the second quarter against Virginia Tech with no film on him, right? And so I
know Jackson Dart, and I say this I know people that know the young man. Very well liked, could literally be the president of the student body. That's just the type of personality he has. So if you think about that, in that locker room, it's the type of guy that his teammates pull for. So if he steps on the field, it probably makes everybody else give a little bit more effort.
And he's far more talented than Keaton Slovis.
Yeah.
My buddy Ryan Roberts, who does NFL draft stuff for Irish Breakdown, really good dude, really good draft analyst. The one guy that he and I strongly disagree on is Keaton Slovis. And I've been saying for 2 years, Keaton Slovis is not that guy. So if Jackson Dart doesn't get hurt against Washington State, I think he's already their starting quarterback. That's what
Do you think he looks at Slovis similar to Sam Darnold? Is that what it is?
No, I just think he kind of looks at, I'll tell you what, he looks at Keaton Slovis like Brian Kelly looked at Ian Book.
Got you.
But I think now it's kind of become obvious that, their Phil Dracovic showed up and they said, okay, yeah, we're going to roll with this, is what I think. Now, we'll find out. But that's kind of how I look at it. B. Straw said, just bought my IB hat. Can't wait to rock it at Notre Dame Stadium. I can't wait to see it either. Hopefully you'll see our tailgate. We will be at the Joyce parking lot, probably between 12:30 is when we'll get set up. And Sean has an IB hat, but he always rocks the Notre Dame hat. But he's got his IB shirt on today.
I do.
Keep getting a lot of West Coast calls today. I don't know if the people that are trying to do the random robocalls are need to get their sales up today. I don't know what's going on. All righty. Chief Brody, I think if they finish with an 11-1 record with this roster and after having these problems, it's pretty well confirming of the health of the program. That is a sizable if, however. There's one thing that I got to push back on. If they finish 11-1 with this roster, are you kidding me? Chief Brody, I love you, man, but name me a team on Notre Dame's schedule that has the roster that Notre Dame has. There isn't one.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you've bought the Kelly hype where you're talking. Name me a team that's recruited the way that Notre Dame plays. Again, I don't care about Alabama because they don't play those teams this year. Name me a team that's recruited the offensive line the way that Notre Dame has the last few years. Notre Dame has one of the 5 best backfields in the country. They have a quarterback that's already shown he can take a team to the Rose Bowl. They have the best tight end in the country and one of the, to me, better receiving cores in the country and a pretty good defense.
Yep.
This roster, should be 6-0 right now.
Yeah.
And these problems are self-inflicted. These are not external problems. These are self-inflicted problems that start at the top. So I love you, man. I hate kind of coming at people like this because especially people that are like longtime listeners. But oh man, it show the health of the program? I think the second part of his comment is spot on, because you can have all those problems that are self-inflicted problems and still go 11-1.
Yeah,
it says a lot about the roster. Because if the roster wasn't what it was, they're not 5-1. They're 3-3, maybe 2-4. If they have a roster from the first 5 years of Brian Kelly's tenure outside of maybe 2012, they're probably 3-3 right now. This team is, and also if you're playing the schedules they played back then too, they're 3-3 right now.
Yeah.
But this team has had far more talent than every team they've played so far. Everyone, including Cincinnati. If yeah.
Health of the program is pretty good.
Yeah, I like that part.
Regardless.
Yeah.
Health of the program is in a good place. Like you said, and you've said it continuously probably since last year. There's some changes that need to be made. And until those changes are made, that next step probably won't be made. Getting to that national title and getting a national championship.
Yep. D. Beasy says, call me crazy, but with a lot of teams playing each other ahead of us, Notre Dame will end up with that 4th spot. And then Chief Brody says, I actually am banking on the chaos happening, but not sure I see Notre Dame getting back up higher than 6 or 7 in the rankings. I want to speak to that a little bit briefly because I think it's way too early for playoff talk. If Notre Dame is going to have a conversation, be in the conversation, 2 things have to happen. Number 1 is the chaos, and I expect chaos to happen. But to Chief Brody's point, even if chaos happens, Notre Dame could go 11-1, playing similar with slight improvements than what we saw in the first half. But for Notre Dame to be a playoff team at 11-1, it needs to be a 11-1 playoff team that just absolutely dismantles their next 6 opponents.
I agree.
They can't win by 7 to 10 points every week. They have to destroy at least 4 of the 6 opponents they play. At least 4, if not 5. I'm talking like 17 to 30 points because the schedule is just not strong enough to compete with what the resumes will be of other teams. So you have to win by, we didn't play a great schedule, but we dominated. That's what helped Clemson all those years. Is Clemson wasn't playing great schedules, but they were destroying people. I mean, they were beating Georgia Tech 77-70, a couple years ago. They were hanging 60 on Florida State. I mean, that's what it would take, in my opinion, for Notre Dame to have a loss and be matched up against other 1-loss teams. The only way Notre Dame makes the top 4 without doing that is if we see the craziest season we've seen in over a decade and there's a bunch of 2-loss teams. Which is possible. I mean, LSU won a national title with Les Miles with 2 losses. It would take that, and that was that same 07 year where USC had a loss and they're thinking they're going to be in the title game. No, that was 06. But that kind of craziness, we're just late season chaos. There's a bunch of 2-loss teams. I don't see that happening. Ohio State would have to have 2 losses. Oklahoma would have to have 2 losses.
Right.
I think Oregon would have to have 2 losses. You'd have to see some the only conference right now that a 1-loss conference champ is ranked behind Notre Dame is the ACC. A 1-loss SEC, Big Ten, Pac-12, and Big 12 champ should all be ranked ahead of Notre Dame.
Yeah, but if Pitt runs the table,
they lost to Western Michigan, they're out.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I think Wake Forest is the only team.
You always think about you get in that room and it's like the conference tie-in,
right?
And you think to yourself, you need UCLA to beat Oregon,
right?
Saturday,
right? Oregon has to lose a game.
Oregon has to lose.
And Oklahoma, the Big Ten teams have to eat themselves. They have to eat themselves up.
Oklahoma would have to lose to State, Oklahoma State, and Bedlam, and probably 1 more loss
or get destroyed.
Yeah,
that would be the thing. They'd have to get blown out by somebody.
Yeah.
And I agree with you about it being Baylor or Oklahoma State because it has to be late.
It has to be late.
if it happens, like let's say they get upset by, never mind, I'm gonna take it back. Let's pretend for a second they'd have lost. They're playing Kansas. I was gonna say this next game, and then I'm like,
Right.
Kansas. Never mind. Let's say they'd have lost to TCU last weekend.
Right.
Notre Dame would probably be ranked ahead of them. But if Oklahoma goes out and blows out the rest of their teams, they're going to beat Baylor on the road, who's going to be ranked. They're going to beat Oklahoma State on the road, who's going to be ranked. They're going to have a better resume. Plus, they're going to play in the Big 12 title game against somebody good. The problem with Notre Dame is what signature win will Notre Dame have? Purdue? They better hope Purdue keeps winning. But even then, it's like Purdue, North Carolina. Here's the thing. There's teams on the schedule, the remainder of the schedule, that could end up ranked. North Carolina could end up ranked. Virginia could end up ranked. But they're not going to end up ranked if they lose to Notre Dame. That's the problem. North Carolina loses to Notre Dame. They got 4 losses. They're not going to be ranked.
Yeah.
If Virginia wins out, because they play BYU before they play Notre Dame. If Virginia wins out between now and the Notre Dame game, they'll be in the top 25.
Yeah.
But if Notre Dame beats them, they're going to drop out of the top 25.
Yeah.
So they don't have any big wins. That's why they have to crush people. They have to absolutely crush people. I think Wake Forest is the only team in the ACC with a shot to get in the playoff right now because they're undefeated. That's the only team. I think a one loss, because I'll say the same about Pitt. If Pitt runs the table, they lost to Western Michigan.
Yeah.
What's their big win? NC State, Wake Forest, if they win, Clemson, who's then going to have 3 losses.
Yeah.
So the ACC to me is it's not it. They're not going to get in unless Wake Forest runs the table. Unless it's like it's the chaos where there's 2 lost conference champions.
More than likely, you see 2 SEC teams.
Unless Georgia runs the table.
Yeah,
Georgia runs the table. Bama's going to have 2 losses.
Yeah.
It's going to be. I'll tell you what. It's going to be a fun second half of the year as a college football fan.
Yeah.
But a lot would have to happen, Sean, for Notre Dame to be in, including they have to destroy. We're going to know Saturday night if Notre Dame has a shot to be in the playoff because they're going to destroy. They're going to have to destroy USC.
Yeah.
What are you going to say? What's frustrating?
It's frustrating for Notre Dame fans. This is why it's frustrating. This is the year that Clemson and Alabama probably won't be in the college football playoff. And you might feel like this is the chance. Like, this is the year we should have gotten in and had a better chance to go up against. Well, you might feel that way. I don't know how you feel. Let me tell you something, man. The Alabama defense you faced last year in the college football playoff is nothing like the Georgia defense.
Or the Alabama defense this year is not.
Or the Alabama
defense. Yeah, the Georgia defense is legit. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you thought Ian Book struggled against Alabama last year, this Notre Dame offense this year going up against that Georgia defense. Now, Kirby Smart will keep it close because that's just what Kirby Smart does. But it just
depends to me on what Notre Dame does, though, Sean. I mean, and this is my point. Here's what I mean by that. If Notre Dame blows out their next 6 opponents, it's because they've made the corrections and they're playing to their potential. Notre Dame playing to their potential can move the ball and score on Georgia. I don't think their secondary is as good as it's been in recent years. They haven't played a team that's good enough up front or good enough on the perimeter in that combination to hang with them.
Well, we'll see.
Notre Dame could be.
Once they face Georgia and Alabama. I mean, not once they face Florida and Alabama, 2 teams with guys on the outside.
We'll have a better idea. Yeah, we'll have a better idea.
Yeah.
But to me, Georgia is the best team this year. This is not a great team, though. And Notre Dame doesn't have to score 40 points to beat Georgia.
No, I talk about the defense all the time. I'm like, that's why you watch Georgia. Just strictly.
Right. You can score 24 to 27 points in a playoff title game and beat Georgia.
Yeah.
And if Notre Dame is playing to its potential with the running backs they have, with the receivers, with the tight end, the only way that Notre Dame is in the playoff is if the offensive line finally plays to its potential and they've made the right choice. That's my point. But based on what Notre Dame has been up to this point in time, they have a long way to go to be a team that could play with Georgia.
They can play with it.
And that's why I'm not optimistic that Notre Dame's going to get there. But the caveat being, my thing is the premise that if Notre Dame destroys their next 6 opponents, that only happens, or at least 4 or 5 of their next 6 opponents, that only happens if the offensive line starts playing to its potential.
But then you have to look at the fact that the next 6 defenses won't really be that good.
Mm-mm.
So,
right,
to then face, I don't care what improvements you make, You can blow all of these teams out.
But Toledo's not that good. You know, I mean, I get Virginia Tech's not a great defense.
What I'm saying is even if they play to their potential,
right, I get you,
or get better and blow these teams out, that's a whole nother level you're going to face.
I mean, but that's true all the time in the playoff. I mean, you're always playing teams in the playoff that are better than what you have. But I still feel like this Georgia team, and here's the other thing too, we don't know, Sean. We don't know if Notre Dame was able to come out and make some plays in the pass game early. And let's say you don't know how Georgia's going to play behind. They're not a play from behind offense. They don't make mistakes. Right.
They're going to play tight.
So you don't have to score 40 points to beat this Georgia team. You can do what Bama did and, take them into overtime at 20. And that's where I'm saying if Notre Dame plays the potential, they can do that, in my opinion. So, but I don't think we're going to find out.
Oh, no.
I think the only way Notre Dame's going to play Georgia is if Georgia drops 2 games between now and then and they play in the Sugar Bowl or something like that.
Chances are very slim.
Yep. Chad Williams says, I do agree with your statement. However, the playoff committee, I think, will look at the past, whether fair or not, and the eye test this year. Even if Notre Dame goes 11, they're not getting in. Now, you can say that, but there's zero evidence of that. And everybody says this. The committee's going to look at the past. Then why does Oklahoma always get in? The committee is not going to look at the past. Why did Ohio State get in when the last 2 times they made the playoff, they got smacked?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the committee doesn't care about that. I keep trying to tell people this. You have to stop associating the committee with ESPN. They have done a pretty good job, in my opinion, of not caring about the outside noise. Most recent example, BYU. Everybody, BYU, and the committee's like, they're like 18th in the first poll or something like that.
Yeah.
Because they're like, they beat South Alabama and a bunch of nobodies.
Right.
The committee does not care about that. I mean, they've been very honest about that and open about that. That's why Oklahoma keeps getting in.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so we have to stop looking at it that way, because that's if there was evidence of that. The reason we talk about there being an anti-Notre Dame bias with ESPN or other places is because you have some evidence you can point to. Now you could argue the case or whatever, but there's at least some evidence that both sides can bring to the table to have that discussion. To me, there's no evidence that the committee looks at what happened in years past. And just there isn't. And there's no evidence that they care about what the national media thinks, because otherwise Georgia would have more than one playoff appearance right now. And now Alabama still would have gotten into the playoff in 2019, even with 2 losses, if you listen to the media. And Notre Dame would have been ranked behind Michigan in 2018, if you listen to the national media.
I think I can speak. There is definitely a sweet and bitter water coming out of the same spout when it comes to Notre Dame in relation to national media. But I'll say this. The boardroom loves Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
The boardroom, the schedulers, and everybody tied into money. They love Notre Dame, right? So much that it's like exuberance. It really is. Like the boardroom, when you talk about what Notre Dame brings as a brand and following and TV revenue, the boardroom loves Notre Dame everywhere. And they have to balance that out when it comes to the media outlets and the writers, because they just can't show that, hey, Notre Dame is really that program. And we know that. So you have your anti-side that might come from the same media outlet with writers that want to talk about, and then they bring in former athletes that went to other schools that were rivals for Notre Dame that go ahead and give that narrative off. That's fine and dandy. Be careful what you see on TV.
Mm-hmm.
As a producer, I'm telling you, be careful what you see on TV. Okay, because what you see might not actually be the real feelings of some of the people behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
They're producing a show,
right,
where they have to give both sides. They just can't be one way. They have to give the full picture. So I understand being upset by some bias and the way it's slanted narratives come out from certain media outlets, but I'm here to tell you from a business standpoint. So when you get into the CFP, business will be discussed.
Mm-hmm.
How does this matchup look? Well, we match up these two teams. How's that going to help? Because at the end of the day, the college football playoff is there to make money. That's why they're expanding it. They're not expanding it because they want to give other teams a true shot.
They don't care about that.
No.
So let me ask you this, Sean. So if Notre Dame is in the top 6 and the 3, 4, 5, and 6 are all close, are you making the case that in those instances Notre Dame will more often than not be given the benefit of the doubt in the playoff? Because I've always felt that was true.
Dude, when Notre Dame has been there, there has been national outcry from writers, talent on these national networks that have gone against Notre Dame getting in at all.
Right.
And I'm talking about an undefeated Notre Dame at all. At the end of the day, that's fine. When you step into that boardroom, the eyes in the boardroom light up.
We saw that last year, Sean. What was the mantra? Notre Dame can't get in the college football playoff with a loss. Well, they have one. Yes. They got in last year with a loss. An embarrassing loss at the end of the year, and they got in. Yeah. Notre Dame's been in the top 4 times. Every time they've had a team worthy of being ranked, they've been ranked. The committee has shown they like Notre Dame a lot. And so, but also there's no evidence anywhere that they look at history and say, well, we're going to not put this team in because they lost the last time.
And honestly,
Notre Dame lost by 17 points last year. They didn't lose by 40.
No.
I mean,
and honestly, I'll take it a step further. This is why there is a push for Notre Dame to get into a conference. They love Notre Dame so much that they want an automatic reason for Notre Dame. And this is why, another reason why the expansion benefits Notre Dame.
Right.
Because that's even more wiggle room for them to get Notre Dame into the picture. Look, inside
I was against that. I thought at first I was very much thinking this is going to screw Notre Dame over.
No.
But Vince changed my mind on that one pretty quickly.
No.
Yeah.
No, and I have to give Jack Swarbrick being in the room meant a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I came down on him hard after that, and I was like, this is bull crap. And Vince had an argument. I was like, you're not going to hear this very often, but you're right, and I've changed my mind. Hey, Sean, Joe Long, who also thinks you have to tap dance for me, also thinks I need to give you some swag to don.
I don't know if that's merch or more Irish Breakdown merchandise.
Yeah.
I'm a dad, man. My swag has kind of been toned down for a while.
But you have Irish Breakdown gear.
I do. This is my Saturday rock for good luck hat during the games.
You have an IB hat. You're wearing an Irish Breakdown shirt right now.
Yes, I have the Got Closer shirt. I have some.
Joe thinks I treat you like crap, Sean. Basically, is where we're coming from on this one.
No. I'm treated very well by Irish Breakdown.
Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Chief Brody has a prediction: 42-27 in favor of the Irish. Searcher Green, Foskey, 3 INTs, maybe with all that time he spends in coverage.
That's funny.
What's funny is that's going to happen one of these days. We're going to all complain about how much he drops in coverage, but he's going to drop into the flat, pass off, and run it back to the house.
Yeah.
And then we're going to feel like idiots. All right. Let's get to a few more before we get out of here.
He's definitely not Dalen Hayes.
Yeah. Chad Williams says BK is excellent off of bye weeks. I hope that trend continues. He's 12-2. Now, the 2 losses were bad losses. They lost in 2011 at home to USC, and then the 2019 loss to Michigan. But, he's had some big wins. North Carolina last year was out of a bye. Yeah. Utah in 2010, his first year. Remember that big Utah win was out of a bye.
Yep.
He's had a couple others. Miami in 2012, where they obliterated Miami, which I know you love bringing that game up with Sean, with Jarrett.
I was there.
Yep. I mean, they've been 12. I mean, you're always going to have your bump. I mean, the Michigan game is the anomaly, right? Like that's been an anomaly. That was just one of those weird days. But they've been very good out of buys.
What's your favorite USC game?
Oh, 2017.
That's your favorite?
It's one of the BK era. Absolutely.
No, I was just speaking in general.
Oh, not 88. 88 for 2 reasons. Number one, it sent him to the title game, and number two, Sean, you remember those big like satellite TVs back in the day?
Yeah.
Like they were like movie theaters, and then you had like the giant satellite out in your yard. A friend of mine who had made way more money than my parents made, had one of those. Jameson Jennings was his name. His dad had one of those, and so we actually watched the USC '88 game on that. So that was, for a 10-year-old, that was pretty sweet.
That was sweet. Which is funny because my favorite game is the '89 game.
Okay.
And I find myself watching it over and over again.
You and I were talking about that the other day during my drive.
Yeah,
the Marinovich game.
The Marinovich game was like, first of all, we talked about this. There was a brawl in the tunnel before the game, so that always gets me stoked. Marinovich was just highly touted, true freshman quarterback. He's supposed to be like the robo quarterback. I was supposed to take over the NFL once he got there. His father trained him. He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, just everything. And he comes into the game, and he plays one of the most incredible first halves I've ever seen from a true freshman on the road at Notre Dame. And USC jumps out, and this true freshman is running around the field talking trash to the D lineman. And it's like, oh my God, who is this kid? And Notre Dame gets back in the game, and the fourth quarter is epic. Notre Dame, think about 9 minutes. They go on like an 8-play, 72-yard drive to take the lead. Tony Wright scores. Marinovich comes right back down the field, throws a touchdown to Gary Weldon, and then Notre Dame comes right back and scores and takes the lead. And then they have to keep USC out of the end zone 2 more times to win the game. It was a great football game. Just fantastic. Mm-hmm. I think that's my favorite Notre Dame USC game. The 88
game frustrated me in '89 because I felt like Notre Dame let USC stay in that game with all those turnovers.
I felt that way. And the more I watch it and I hear the names on that USC defense, I'm like, oh, okay. Like, they had some
Mark Carey on that team. I think Carey was on that team.
Yeah. Mark Carey's on that team.
Yeah, that was a really good football team.
Yeah.
Just a little bit about the buys. So somebody pointed out that last time Notre Dame had a bye week against a rival was the Michigan game in 2019. My point was, here we go. Brody said last time Notre Dame came off a bye to face a rival, they got smashed in the Big House. That is true. He is accurate on that. However, again, I think that's the anomaly. In 2017, they had a bye week against USC and before USC, and we saw what happened in that game. 2015, they had a bye before the Temple game, went on the road and beat a ranked opponent. Even in 2016, as bad as 2016 was, they had a bye before the Miami game and then came out and beat a 8 or 9 win Miami team that year. I mean, so they've been pretty good coming out of byes, I think.
And I think that Michigan game gets a bad rap, right? Because I know what the final score was, but if you really go back and look at that game, there were a couple of turning points early where that game really could have been
the Jonathan Jones block, the Bo Bauer block punt that Jonathan Jones tried to recover and gave back to Michigan.
Yeah, Notre Dame could have been up
14-point swing.
Could have been Notre Dame could have been up double digits early in that game. And things would have gone totally different. So it's hindsight, though.
Yep,
it's a bad loss.
Yep. So get to a few more of these before we move on here. All right, Brandon, we'll be there tomorrow. Look forward to seeing you. Look forward to seeing everybody that's going to be there tomorrow. We have a super chat down here, I believe, from D. Beasy. Bob Sacamano. Great show today, gents. Thank you, Bob. It's been a while since we've had a 3-hour one, Sean. It's gone by pretty quickly, I think.
Are we at 3 hours?
Yeah, we're over 3 hours. It's what happens. We get to talking. So just a couple comments here. We're gonna kind of to wrap it up here. We got to get rolling, but John Rich says he's talking about the coaches that can turn things around in baseball. Billy Martin was lightning in a bottle at winning, but flamed out after a few years everywhere he went. He was a darn good player as well, but was traded away as poison to the team. Yeah, because he had that really wild. He was like kind of like an Urban Meyer type of. Just some guys just you can't be with them that long. You come in, you let them do what they got to do for 4 or 5 years, and then it's like, okay, you stabilize things. Let's get the heck out of here.
Everybody can't be Tommy Lasorda.
Right.
And be in a dugout for 20 plus years.
Right.
Yeah.
It's hard to win over a long period of time.
It really is.
It really is.
Or Bobby Cox, somebody like that. I think that stretch Atlanta Braves had, from like the late 80s until like the early 2000s was ridiculous. That's an anomaly, like you said, in coaching. Yeah.
Zach Garza says my top 6 most hated teams: number 1, Alabama; number 2, Michigan; number 3, Stanford, almost number 2; number 4, Florida State; number 5, Miami; number 6, USC. I don't hate Stanford. I don't care enough about Stanford to hate them.
No.
And Alabama to me doesn't really matter to me. I mean, I respect. I don't hate people that do things and great things. Who's your top 3, Sean? Because Miami's definitely the top of my list, and then Michigan's number 2. I don't hate USC, but I think that's also partly when I grew up. When I grew up, Notre Dame dominated USC, and they've they like. I mean, Lou beat him like 9 years in a row, something like that. That was during my formative years. I mean, they never beat Notre Dame when Notre Dame was good. It wasn't until Pete came along and I was already older, and at that time I was in college and coaching, so it just didn't affect me as much. But yeah, Miami and Michigan are definitely in my top 2, and I have to think hard about my third.
I would put Michigan number 1. Miami would be number 2.
So we have the same 1 too, just in a little bit different order.
Same 1, 2, just flipped a little bit, and I would have to go back. I hated George Perlis.
Oh, okay.
George Perlis. When they were on our schedule, I couldn't stand George Perlis. I just couldn't. I didn't like Michigan State. I know people hate Michigan, but I dislike Michigan State just as much.
See, I would like that rivalry to be back on the schedule. It's interesting. That's very interesting.
I really did. I'll give you another team that I really didn't like. And
I didn't like my number 3. I'm curious if the team you're about to talk about is my number 3.
I didn't like Purdue at all either.
No, that's not mine. Yeah.
No, I didn't like Purdue.
Penn State's mine. I hate Penn State.
Oh, you know what? That's good.
I didn't like Joe Paterno before we found out what was going on.
What was going on? Yeah.
I didn't like him before that. Yeah.
That's funny because I pulled for Penn State when they were playing Miami in the national championship game.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because, Miami's number 1 on my list.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always rooted for the northern teams whenever. I mean, I grew up in Ohio. So, like, I always kind of rooted for the northern team. So if Ohio State was playing USC, I'd root for Ohio State. Even, like when Ohio State played Miami in 2002, I rooted for Ohio State. Just, they're the northern team. Same with Penn State. So
you say Penn State, I would throw at that time. I'm talking about like at the core of like my fandom, and it was only like for probably 3 years. I think we played them 3 times in like 5 years. I couldn't stand Colorado either.
Okay, that was such a short window.
It was a short window, but like facing them in bowl games. Like 3 times those 5 years, and they were epic. They meant something.
Yeah.
And I've
blocked the third one out. I don't count the third one.
I'm still irritated that I shared the last name of a guy that kept us from beating them the second time on a clip that meant nothing. Like there's no reason to touch the guy. Just let Rocket do his thing. Yeah, guys, I'm sorry that Davis had to do that. But Greg Davis, he was actually a pretty good player.
Yeah.
Moving forward for Notre Dame in the defensive backfield.
Yeah. So a couple people have mentioned that Drake Bowen said he's going to announce November 7th. He says Drake Bowen committing the 7th. Do you think it's definitely Notre Dame, or do you think Auburn and Clemson actually have a chance? I don't know who he's going to pick. I will say that this is I've been saying all along, he's not the lock to Notre Dame that people think he is.
What people think, yeah.
Just because he's from in-state doesn't mean he's an in-state kid. He's not. His family is not born and raised in northern Indiana. He very much likes the southern schools. If Notre Dame gets him, and I don't have any intel on where he's going to go, I'm just being honest. If Notre Dame gets him, they will have had to work very, very hard to get him. That will be a big pickup because I don't think they've been his leader for much of his recruitment, to be honest with you. And that's not that they haven't done a great job with him. It's just he has always liked the southern schools a lot. So does Notre Dame have a shot? Yeah, I think the fact that he's coming back on campus this weekend for like the second time in a month It's a good sign. But there's work to be done. He's always this is a little sooner than I thought he would commit. I thought he would commit in the spring. So maybe that's a good sign. I hope it is a good sign, but it's not a lock to Notre Dame, or at least it hasn't been up until the point he makes his decision, because I think those other schools have given him a lot to think about. And I think Notre Dame has had to overcome his desire to play in the South, more so than you would think a kid from Merrillville, Indiana.
Are you worried more about, would you say you're worried more about Clemson or Auburn per se?
Probably Clemson. Although they're having a bit of a rough year. Because here's the other thing, too. He's a huge baseball kid. I mean, he's big time into baseball. And so that's going to have a big factor in his decision, too. He's going to go somewhere where he can play. He's being recruited by two staffs at once by all these schools. So it's not just about, and that's where actually I think Notre Dame, that's where actually I feel a little bit better about Notre Dame's chances.
Having an advantage?
Because of Link Jarrett being at Notre Dame's baseball team and the success he's had.
Yeah.
I think they have a much better opportunity. I'll tell you right now, if Link Jarrett wasn't Notre Dame's baseball coach right now, I would say Notre Dame wouldn't get him.
Yeah.
And that has nothing. That's not a knock on the coaching. I mean, even if the Notre Dame coaching staff knocked it out of the park, this is a kid that is a legitimate big time baseball player. And playing both sports, from everyone that I've ever talked to close to him, says that's going to have a huge impact on where he goes. And so the fact that Notre Dame has been what they've been in baseball the last 2 years is only going to help Notre Dame. And look, Marcus Freeman and Chad Bowden have done a phenomenal job recruiting him. But the natural inkling for him and his family, from all the sources I have, is that he wanted to go down south. And it's because of the job that the football coaches have done and the baseball coaches have done that I think Notre Dame has a very, very good chance here, but it's definitely not a lock. I think there's this thought, Sean, that because he's an Indiana kid and went to Merrillville, that it's a no-brainer. It's not. It's not. If they get him, that's going to not be your typical Indiana kid, in my opinion, at all. So we'll see. I'm going to have to – I mean, that obviously that's come out on Twitter recently. I haven't seen that. I've been doing the show.
It posted up about 30 minutes ago.
Yeah. So I'll take a peek. I'll take a peek at that. So, and try to do some digging on that one. So I'll get down here some more. Get down here. Okay. Terry Howie says, it is time for the Marcus Freeman head coaching era at Notre Dame before he gets recruited to another top 10 job. Fantastic recruiter who gets kids that Kelly has no chance of getting. I mean, after the first part of that, I think the rest of that is pretty accurate. I feel like it's still a little bit too early to just say it's time to get rid of Brian Kelly to bring Marcus Freeman in. I mean, everybody knows I'm not the biggest Brian Kelly fan in the world in a lot of different ways, but Notre Dame was winning a whole lot of football games before Marcus Freeman got here. Would I like to see, in the natural order of things, Marcus Freeman be the next head coach of Notre Dame? I wouldn't be opposed to that at all. But it's not 6 games into his tenure as defensive coordinator. I mean,
right.
I'm just not there yet. All right, see if there's any more couple things we got to get to. See any other super chats. Okay, let's see here. Terry Howie says, tool worker, if I guarantee if Freeman isn't named head coach within the next 2 years, he will be running this show at a top 10 school. Tool worker says, I'm afraid you're right. Jack made the deal with Freeman to get him here, not Brian Kelly. I'm telling you, he's leaving. This is a new thing that's floating around the internet, that Jack Swarbrick is the reason Marcus Freeman came here and Brian Kelly had no role. That is not accurate from anything I've heard. And look, I'm all about criticizing Brian Kelly when it's warranted. I've said publicly recently, and I didn't say it at the time, but I can now say comfortably now that those coaches are gone, that Brian Kelly is not the reason Chip Long and Mike Elko and Paul and Clark Lee came to Notre Dame. That was a Jack Swarbrick, Chad Klunder push, not a Brian Kelly push. That is not at all what my sources told me about Brian Kelly going after Marcus Freeman. Was Jack Freeman involved, or Jack Swarbrick involved? Yes, because he's the AD. He's the one that's going to be able to say how much money you can give. But from what I'm told, Brian Kelly very much had a role in that. So, I mean, look, I'm all for being critical of Brian Kelly when it's warranted, but I don't want to just invent ways to criticize him when my sourcing, Sean, and I don't know if you've heard anything different from what I just said, but I have not heard at all that Brian Kelly wasn't heavily involved in getting Marcus Freeman to come here.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you just said.
So we'll see. But no, I also, yes, you want to have Marcus Freeman here, but you also don't fire a coach that's doing what Brian Kelly's done because you're afraid to lose Marcus Freeman.
And if you're a really good coach, you can't be afraid to lose. Look, Nick Saban loses really good assistants all the time.
Mm-hmm.
All the time. Like if you have a healthy enough program, you can continue to win and get a really good assistant to come in and continue what's already flowing. Mm-hmm. So if you want to be the big time, this Notre Dame fans, if we want to be a big time program, get used to losing assistants. Mm-hmm. That's what big time programs do. They lose assistants and really good ones sometimes. Yeah. So
now I'd like for it to work out that way,
but
well if it doesn't, then it doesn't. There's not one magical coach that can come to Notre Dame and be successful. Right. When Lou Holtz got hired in '88, you needed a special guy.
Yeah,
but Lou Holtz wasn't the only special guy that could have got that done.
Correct.
You know, so yeah, but and if Marcus Freeman, like I could understand Marcus Freeman leaving if, like, let's say Kelly retired after the year and they went and hired Jeff Brom or Dave Aranda, and Marcus Freeman was like, well, you know,
right,
I got an opportunity. That's fine because he's not going to get the head coaching job.
Right.
I don't think Marcus Freeman is going to be as impatient at Notre Dame if Brian Kelly's still the head coach, because I think he understands the opportunities in front of him. I don't think he was promised a head coaching job, but I'd be shocked if that conversation hasn't been had at some level.
I was just about to say that conversation takes place. That conversation has to take place in the next, if it hasn't happened, in the next year to year and a half, because Brian Kelly has to be honest about where he is in his tenure at Notre Dame. And he's been here. He's been at this school for a long time, a very long time. And at some point, you know, you have to move on, whether it's to just step away or possibly go to the NFL and accept another challenge, whatever it is. I don't know if there's another move he can make in college football per se that would be a better move than being at Notre Dame, because, I mean, he's in a pretty good position right now.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think of what jobs could come open the next 3 years that would, you know, unless he wants to go somewhere smaller first. And that'd be the only thing that I could think of. Like, he wants to go to a Virginia Tech first before getting a job like Notre Dame, if he feels that's the correct career path.
Yeah.
Maybe. But I don't know if Marcus Freeman's someone that feels he has to go, you know, cut his teeth at a Wake Forest or a Virginia Tech. And I say Wake Forest just because of how well Dave Clawson's doing. You know, maybe he gets a job somewhere else or something like that.
Let's say USC, because he is on their short list. Let's say USC scoops up Luke Fickell.
Mm-hmm.
And Cincinnati comes after Marcus Freeman.
I don't think he takes that job.
I don't think he takes the job either. But, I mean,
they're going to lose a lot, first of all, from that team.
Absolutely.
They're going to lose their quarterback. They're going to lose Myjai Sanders. They're going to lose Ahmad Gardner. I mean, they're going to lose Michael Young. I mean, they're going to lose a lot of dudes.
Yeah. But I'm sure with the landscape, look, Marcus Freeman is going to get calls this offseason. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to happen. You know, I don't know if it's going to be from a big-time program, mid-level program, but he's getting calls.
Yeah.
This offseason.
No question. Chase Talk Sports says, this is going to be my first night game, and I don't think I could have chosen a better one. Look, if your first night game is with you against USC, you are correct. You can't pick a better one. It is a fun environment. Sean, have you been to one of these USC Notre Dame night games?
I have not been to a night game at Notre Dame Stadium.
Really?
So that's something I have to take care of in the next year or so. So
wow, yeah, we gotta do something about that.
Year, so we have to
do something about that.
Yeah,
we'll talk a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about this one for sure. For sure. Okay, I think we're out of here. We got a super chat down here from Corey D. If you polled all coaches in college and conducted an anonymous poll I bet Notre Dame would finish one of the most attractive jobs. As the most attractive job. You agree? No, not the most attractive job. No, because there's going to be a lot of coaches that are afraid of that will be afraid of the pressure that comes from Notre Dame.
Yeah, I agree.
There are also some coaches who want an easier path. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Would Notre Dame be one of the 5? I think it would be now. And this is where I don't think a lot of the people that are against Brian Kelly. See, this is where I'm at. Like, I've praised Brian Kelly for a lot of things. I've criticized him for a lot of things too. But a lot of the people that all they do is criticize Brian Kelly, they don't give him enough credit, or Jack Swarbrick enough credit, for where they've brought this program from the moment they inherited it. Notre Dame was a program that no big-time coaches wanted for several different coaching searches.
Yep.
It wasn't just like it was. I mean, you hired George O'Leary and then settled on Ty Willingham, right? So this has been going on for a while. You had look, they didn't hire Charlie Weiss because, gee, let's go get that alum and that's the number one guy. It's because nobody else wanted none of the other top coaches you wanted the job.
Right.
They tried to go after Kirk Ferentz and Bob Stoops before they hired Brian Kelly. They both, the Iowa head coach said no thanks to Notre Dame. Now, I think there's multiple reasons for that, but it wasn't a super attractive job. Facilities were below average. The pay for coaches was terrible. The field sucked. The stadium was good, but getting old. Let's be honest. The NBC contract was less important because so many more teams were playing on national TV every Saturday.
Yeah,
it was not a good job. And you look at it now, and it's not just Brian Kelly, but it's also Jack Swarbrick. But the two of them together as a partnership have brought Notre Dame to a point where the facilities are outstanding. The stadium is completely renovated and modern looking. The field's great now. The recruiting operation is great. They got an indoor facility. The practice fields are way better. They're getting ready to renovate the Goog. Notre Dame has spent about $1 billion in the last decade of upgrading the operation. And it is and people like Marcus Freeman and Mike Elko and Chip Long and Harry Heastand have shown you can recruit elite players here. And I think that's the final thing. Marcus Freeman has kind of nailed the final nail in the coffin of the people who say you can't recruit elite players in Notre Dame. Marcus Freeman said, okay, there's a lot of myths that Brian Kelly and Jack Swarbrick have dismissed. I'm going to get rid of this final one. Okay, that you can't recruit elite defensive players who look a certain way from a certain part of the country that play certain positions.
Yeah.
Okay, that's now gone. And so I do think there's a lot of coaches that view this job. And I'll be honest with you, I've talked to several Power 5 coaches who are like, more and more teams are starting to. I had one coach say, look, man, I'll be honest with you, 5 years ago, we didn't even think about Notre Dame as a competitor for kids. We never talked about Notre Dame. Now we're talking about Notre Dame. And I know for a fact, this is coming from the horse's mouth, so to speak. There are a lot of Division I coaches who are concerned about who's going to replace Brian Kelly because they're worried that they're going to bring in someone that they're like, uh-oh. You know what I mean? Like they're hoping that there's the next hire, a Charlie Weiss or a Ty Willingham type of hire. Because there's a lot of people afraid that if they bring in the right kind, because they know that Brian Kelly doesn't work on the recruiting trail. They know he's made bad hires. They know there's assistant coaches that are like, I'm not worried about recruiting against that guy. They know this. This is coming from conversations with other Division I coaches. And that's why they were a little nervous when Marcus Freeman got hired. That Marcus Freeman coming to Notre Dame sent shockwaves through the college football world. Because a lot of people are like, wait a minute, what? Like, crap. Now I got to go against that guy on the recruiting trail. Like, I haven't seen Clark Lee in 3 years. He doesn't recruit the same dudes we're recruiting.
Right.
Uh-oh. What's Freeman going to do? And then all of a sudden he's recruiting those dudes. And you're like, hope he leaves soon. You know, I'm just telling you, that's what's being told. That's the discussion being had.
I agree.
And so, yeah, there's people that are like, I hope they don't hire such and such when Kelly leaves. Because people are afraid. Because they know that once Notre Dame starts winning at the big level, they see it.
Yeah.
Kids are going to want to go there. They just are.
I think to go to the question, I would have to disagree. Oh, he said finish one as the most. Oh, no.
He says, they'd finish one. He said they're going to finish one.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they're one of, not number one.
Yeah, one of, I would agree with. As the number one attractive job, the way everything, the landscape of college football right now, no. And see, Brian, for me, I would just have to say Alabama will probably be number one right now, just from a perception standpoint and the way it's been built up. But once again, that's perception. So we're doing this anonymously, right?
Yeah.
Because I think there would be a push of people in the room that say, you know what, Notre Dame is flat out special.
Yeah.
Like it's just a special job. If you win there, you're
because the thing about Notre Dame is you only got to win once.
Yes, you're an icon.
Look at Lou Holtz.
Absolutely.
I mean, Notre Dame's had what, three head coaches have won multiple titles.
Absolutely.
They have two guys that won titles that have statues. There's two coaches in Notre Dame that have statues built for them. And they won one title.
Yeah.
One. You win one title at Auburn, you're getting fired 2 years later.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, but something you just said about what Notre Dame is some of the same issues that USC is dealing with right now, and how the job is being perceived. Like when you really look at the brick and mortar of the job and what's there, it's like it might not be as attractive as most people think.
Right.
To a lot of coaches. All of that being said, I do think Notre Dame would be in most
definitely the top 5 to 7, if not higher.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think there's a couple programs.
I don't think it would be number one.
No. Because there's still stigmas about Notre Dame that some coaches want no part of.
But to go to what you said, I think there are a lot of coaches that believe Notre Dame is
sleeping giant.
Truly a sleeping giant.
Yeah.
Like
they know that there's things Notre Dame can offer that nobody else can offer. They know that they're not stupid. Why do you think so many schools recruit so hard against Notre Dame?
Yeah.
I mean, I've known coaches in the SEC that have said, I would rather see a kid go to our rival than Notre Dame. Because they're afraid if a kid from a public school in Florida goes to Notre Dame and is successful and gets drafted, gets an education, that's just going to open up a floodgate for kids.
That's a trend.
Because they're all saying you can't go to Notre Dame if you're a minority kid and you're this and you're not going. I mean, the kids are being told that today. You can't thrive. Look, black kids can't go there and be good in the class. I mean, that's what's going on today. Sean, you and I both know this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the fear, and that's what happened with Lou Holtz's teams.
As an advocate on my side of things, being an African American in media and being in connection with some of these young kids, I go push against that.
Right.
Like, why would you allow somebody to tell you where you can't be successful?
Right.
Like you can go wherever you want to go and be successful if that's what you want to do, especially when it comes to education. Like you're the one in the books.
But you and I also know that a lot of these kids in certain parts of the country don't have advocates like that around them.
Yeah.
They come from failing school systems.
Yes.
And they don't have people, or they're like me growing up, that they don't have parents that went through the recruiting process or don't know what questions to ask. They believe these people, these professionals, well, I don't want to send my kid up there if that's what's going on. Like, I mean, I told my dad and I've had this conversation. If we'd have known when I was coming as a senior, if we'd have known then what I know now, I would have made a completely different decision. But I was the son of two people that never finished high school, much less gone to college. We didn't know what to do.
I agree.
And that's the problem. And they're afraid that and we saw this under Lou Holtz. When Lou Holtz won, the floodgates open for recruiting. He'd go anywhere. I mean, he'd go anywhere and get anybody. He was getting kids out of Miami. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, and that's what they're afraid of. They're afraid that if Brian Kelly or anyone were to win a title at Notre Dame with the way the facilities are now, we're effed. And that's not my opinion.
No, you're right.
I'm telling you, Sean, you talk to professionals, you talk to I've talked to Division I coaches about this. There's a big fear. Now, 10 years ago, different story. Like, man, their facilities suck. They don't pay coaches anything. Like they have no way. But it's different. It's a different world now. And people know that. They see Notre Dame as that sleeping giant. They're very concerned about that.
Yeah.
And it's the same with USC and same with Texas. They're afraid that those teams are going to luck into because those are not easy jobs to win at. They're not as easy as you think. USC is not as easy to win at as people think. There's a lot of stumbling blocks and roadblocks in front of them that people don't, which is why USC's always had a hard. You'd think if USC is such a great job, then why can't they ever hire a good coach?
That's a good point.
Because it's not there's a lot of stumbling blocks to winning there.
Yeah,
there just are.
It's just. I think that one stretch they had under Pete Carroll, which no one saw coming. It was almost like a domino effect.
Right.
Now he gets Carson Palmer, and then the next thing you know, he gets some really good players. And next thing you know,
Pac-12 sucked at the time as well.
Pac-12 sucked. Absolutely, they dominated, and they go on a run. But even Pete Carroll wanted to get out of there.
Right. And look what happened when he left. Look all the stuff that came about.
Yeah.
So anyway. Well, Sean, I think that's a great place to end the program. Great place to end today's program. So thank you so much for being honest. This was like one of the summer shows, man, where we went super long, but I thought a lot of great conversation, a lot of great questions, people pushing back, and I love that. That makes it for a fun show. So, John, thank you so much for being on with us, buddy. We're gonna talk after the show about the particulars of the run versus pass bet that you and I are going to have, and then we're going to talk about that night game, that lack of night game attendance here at Notre Dame. So we're going to chat about that.
Whatever place, I'm telling you, man, I'm going to place a call to Graham Harrell right now to the people I know out there, and kind of cheat a little bit on the bet. And I love ribeyes, so whatever the best ribeye is in town.
If I find out that, then the ribeye is going to be at my house on my grill, and it's not going to be cooked the way that you want it.
No, I'm sure you grill better than anybody in the city.
I grill very well, but yes. Because I know how to grill, I also know how to mess up a steak for someone who cheated.
You wouldn't do that.
If you cheated, no, I wouldn't. But my wife wouldn't let me. Are you kidding me? Angela wouldn't let me do that. Yeah. So anyway, Sean, appreciate it. Thanks for helping us out so much this week. You did a great job. We'll have you back on. Check out the Lucky Lefty podcast if you haven't done it. Give us a like, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, sign up for the message board. Got some big things coming up. I'm going to put an announcement on there today that's about Irish Breakdown and kind of some next steps for us that I'm very excited about. Yeah, check it out. Be with us. No doubt about it. Fired up. And then, of course, tomorrow night, 7:30 Eastern, Notre Dame, USC. We're going to be back on afterwards to talk about the game. We'll have our post-game breakdown, obviously, after the game. And, of course, tomorrow from about 12 to 12:30 until about 6:30 to 7, we will be in the Joyce parking lot with the Irish Breakdown tailgate. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. Got the food ordered. Going to go pick all that up today. So hope to see everybody there. And Sean, we'll have to get you down here for one of these here very, very soon as well, my man.
Absolutely. And we'll have our preview show live tomorrow on our YouTube channel. That's the Lucky Lefty Podcast YouTube channel at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern.
You guys also have a Twitter handle as well, correct?
Yeah,
you guys tweet out all your shows?
Lucky Lefty Pod. Lucky Lefty Pod on Twitter and Instagram. You can catch up with us there as well.
They will also post their shows on the Irish Breakdown group page as well, so you can find it there also. So for Sean, I'm Brian. Have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the game tomorrow night, and we will talk to you again very, very soon.
Go Irish.